True heroes make it all look so effortless, like your Hotpoint multi-flow oven from Curry's PC World. It cooks the perfect roast chicken thanks to the evenly distributed heat and keeps your oven spotless. All the grease is removed by catalytic liners, so you can spend more time cooking and less time cleaning. Plus, you'll even get a 1 in 10 chance of winning £500 when you buy any Hotpoint Easy Clean oven. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Terms and register at curryswin500.co.uk.
News and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahit.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, 30 minutes into the equity market open, it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on in European equities because we started ever so slightly in the green, then a few minutes ago we dipped into the red, and now we're back in the green, up 0.2%. Looking across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 up 0.3%, the CAC 40's flat, the DAX is in the green, the IBEX and FTSE MIB trade flat. US stocks sent a clear message to the Fed yesterday. Not enough, not happy. We saw a drop of 3% in US equities after the emergency rate cut from Jerome Powell and his messaging saying that he understood it could not do everything to offset the impacts of the coronavirus. We're seeing futures on the front foot today, but that seems to be more to do with Joe Biden's comeback in Super Tuesday. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all up by 1.4%. The bond market also sending the signal that the Fed is likely to have to do a lot more. The 10-year yield dropping below 1% for the first time ever. 94 handle, down 6 basis points. We continue the slide. Across the curve, we also continue the slide. The 2-year yield down 5 basis points, 65 handle. That is not at a record low yet. The 30-year yield down 3 basis points, 158. And taking a look at what yields are doing in Europe, the 10-year bund yield slips a basis point to negative 64. 10-year gilt yield 4 basis points down to a 35 handle. In FX, we've seen 3 days of dollar weakness. The dollar's fairly steady today, but you are seeing quite a few G10 rally against it. The Aussie, the best performer, up 0.3%. The Fed rate cut really did take the dollar down with it as well. Looking at the yen, though, that's also retreating, which is interesting because that's signaling perhaps a touch of risk on, a little bit of a mixed messages that we're getting from some of these markets in terms of whether we're risk on or risk off today. Dollar yen at 107.44, up 0.3%. And in terms of commodity markets, you're seeing oil pretty much unchanged ahead of OPEC Plus, and gold retreating down 0.3%, $1,635 an ounce.
Right, on to some of today's top stories. Global finance ministers and central bankers have pledged to do whatever it takes to support the global economy. And the Fed took action. It cut the benchmark rate by 0.5 point. The biggest reduction and the first outside a scheduled meeting since 2008. Following the decisions, the US 10-year yield dropped to a historic low, below 1%.
The World Health Organization says it's never too late for containment efforts on the coronavirus. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The WHO tells countries never give up the fight, and more governments do take action. South Korea unveils a $10 billion extra budget. The RBI governor says he's ready to act. Hong Kong's de facto central bank cuts rates 50 basis points, just like the Fed. On getting back to work, satellite data shows economic activity in China is picking up. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, JP Morgan's asking thousands of US employees to work from home. That's as it tests a contingency plan for closing offices if the coronavirus spreads. Around 10% of staff across its consumer bank are working remotely as part of the plan. Banks around the world are working to ensure their businesses stay up and running.
And other companies are taking various measures because of the virus. Amazon notified employees on Tuesday of the first confirmed case of coronavirus among its U.S. workforce. Boeing is postponing a suppliers summit scheduled for later this month in Washington, D.C. Ford banned its employees from any air travel for most of this month. And Google called off its flagship conference in May due to coronavirus concerns. And as I was saying, in the data check, equity and bond markets don't seem convinced that yesterday's surprise Fed rate cut will be enough. Certainly yesterday, stocks tumbled. The US 10-year yield fell below 1% for the first time ever. Earlier, Manus Cranny and I spoke to Mark Mobius, co-founder and partner at Mobius Capital Partners. We began by asking him if the Fed's move was a crisis reaction or a prudent front-running response.
Yeah, a little bit of both. But the bottom line is that they're pushing on a string. The problem is not so much interest rates. Interest rates are already very, very low globally. I mean, you look at Europe, you look at Japan, so forth. The problem is the supply chain coming out of China. This is the big, big difference between what we have now and what we had with SARS and these other problems we had in the past. The problem now is that there's so many products and parts coming out of China. When that is interrupted, everybody in the world is affected. So I think looking at emerging markets specifically, particularly Asia, they're very dependent upon China for trade and for parts and for a supply chain, which is now not really giving them what they want.
Mark, great to speak to you today. If we get more cuts from the Fed, the market is looking perhaps for another 50 basis points from here. Is that going to succeed in loosening financial conditions? Didn't work yesterday.
I don't think so. I think it's good, it helps, but the bottom line will be the possibility of further tax cuts. I think if Trump is able to put into force further tax cuts, then that will help more than the interest rate cuts.
Mark, what about stepping in with tariff relief? I mean, tax cuts might be harder to deliver in an election year, or is that a real probability? What about stepping back on the tariffs and tariffs that he's already got in place?
Yes, that would help to some degree, but don't forget, it's not only the U.S. that's involved here, but it's a global situation. China is the supplier of parts globally. For example, automobile parts going to Mexico, which eventually end up in the U.S., is the kind of thing that you see. It's a global phenomenon. So you have to, if you're going to cut tariffs, you got to do it globally. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Mark, has the U.S. equity market found a bottom yet?
I don't think so. From the looks of it, I think you're probably going to see further weakness. As you can see, the Fed cut really hasn't had that much impact. And further cuts probably are not going to do that much good. As I said, I think the real key would be tax cuts so that these companies can survive. There are a lot of companies going to go bust based on this current situation.
Let's just dig a little bit deeper into the calls. We've got Scott Maynard saying another 15% lower on equities and 0.25% in treasuries. Give us the Mobius call. If it gets worse, how bad does it get for bond and stock?
I think it can be a lot worse than we had with SARS. Let's put it that way. Unless China is able to ramp up production. I noticed that the Chinese government is trying to ship workers to their place of work and trying to push up production again. But a lot depends on that, their ability to get the supply chain working again.
That was Mark Mobius, co-founder and partner in Mobius Capital Partners.
Right, let's get the latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans, who starts with Super Tuesday.
Yes, Roger, good morning. Let's start in the US. Senator Bernie Sanders has won the biggest prize of Super Tuesday. That's California. But former Vice President Joe Biden has staged a stunning comeback, winning 9 states, including Texas.
For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just a few days ago, the press and the pundits had declared the campaign dead.
Meanwhile, one of the biggest upsets of the night was Joe Biden winning Massachusetts. It's a blow to Sanders, who has been expected to win there. Now let's cross over to Europe, where the EU is pledging €700 million in aid to help Greece discourage migrants at the border with Turkey. Officials have visited Bulgaria and Greece to assess the situation. Calling for order after violence over the weekend, European Council President Charles Michel promised to stand by Athens.
The message is very clear. You can count on the European solidarity. In case of necessity, we will be present. We will be active and committed to support you.
Now, Japan's Olympics minister has said it's possible to delay this summer's Olympics to later this year. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds says that comes amid fears that the coronavirus outbreak could cause the Games to be cancelled altogether.
Seiko Hashimoto told Parliament Japan was doing all it could to make sure the International Olympic Committee would judge it safe to hold the event starting July 24th as planned. But she said the terms under which Tokyo was awarded the Games did not seem to rule out a few months of delay. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Facebook and its partners are considering redesigning the Libra cryptocurrency. The new plan could see the network accept multiple coins, including those issued by central banks. It's an effort to woo reluctant regulators and build momentum for the cryptocurrency. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now with the morning sport, here's Lewis Mason starting with a defeat for Liverpool in the FA Cup.
Chelsea have beaten Liverpool 2-0 to secure their place in the FA Cup quarter-finals and inflict a third defeat in 4 games on Jurgen Klopp's team. Newcastle survived a late fight back from West Brom to win 3-2 at the Hawthorns after taking a 3-0 lead. Billy Sharp's extra-time winner sent Sheffield United through to the next round with a 2-1 win against Reading. Hearts are off the bottom of the Scottish Premiership after beating rivals Hibernian 3-1 in the Edinburgh Derby. England manager Gareth Southgate has thrown his support behind goalkeeper Jordan Pickford after a string of errors for Everton. Southgate's side have been drawn to face Belgium, Iceland and Denmark in the Nations League. The games will run from September to November, with the finals taking place next summer.
Lewis Mason with all the latest sport. Now, 40 minutes into the European opening, stock 600 up 0.6%, FTSE 100 up 0.8%, CAC up 0.4%. Bit of optimism there, but you look across to US Treasuries, 0.936% is where we find them.
Hi everyone, Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
A change is coming. Millions of people across the UK are realising that if their broadband's out of contract, they could be out of pocket. So it's time to switch and save with Vodafone Superfast Broadband for £21.95 a month. Join the Great British Broadband switch today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
18-month contract subject to credit check. Publicly available out of contract, non-promotional pricing. Superfast 1, 73% of customers receive sync speeds above 35 megabits per second. See vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
The thing that I would say to anybody that was thinking about a job in social care is go for it. I'm Georgia. I love social care because you never know what each day will bring. It's emotional sometimes, highs and lows, but no 2 days are the same. I love the work, yeah. It makes me feel really good as a person. We make people smile every day.
If you want to make a difference to your life, care for someone else's, visit everydaysdifferent.com to find jobs in adult social care.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Red Dwarf. Our engines are dead and we're being sucked into a black hole. Can anyone hear me? Over? The only thing that's over is us, Crichton. We're finished.
Guys, relax. I've got smart breakdown with the AA. It sends them your vehicle's fault data, so they should know what's wrong before they even get here.
I don't believe it.
What, that they'll already know what's wrong?
No, that you're actually capable of something useful.
The future of breakdown today. The AA. Drive smart. See the AA.com for details.
The S in Audi S-Line stands for many things like sporty, stylish, streamlined, and now seductively priced. Like the Audi Q2 S-Line, which you can now drive from £329 per month, £1,974 initial rental. Test drive one at your local Audi centre, but you'll have to be swift. The offer ends soon. Search Audi S-Line. Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik. With 36-month contract hire, 10,000 miles per annum, 18s and over, subject to status. Damage charges may apply. No ownership. Ordered by 31st of March 2020 from participating centres. Audi Financial Services. Visit audi.co.uk.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
The famous five were discussing their next adventure to Cardiff. Let's visit the Millennium Centre, said Dick. The National Museum, added Julian. The castle, cried Anne. Dick jumped up. We'd better leave now. Cardiff's so far away. Relax, said George. It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas. London to Cardiff in as little as 1 hour 42 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Cardiff Central. Terms and conditions apply.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to Bloomberg's Tatiana Darrier in our London studio for today's morning call. Good morning, Tatiana.
Good morning, Roger. Stocks continuing their recovery as investors continue to digest the latest from the Fed, the Super Tuesday results in the U.S., and the latest data from China, where we heard that car sales last month fell about 80% year over year. The Stoxx 600 here in Europe had reversed earlier losses and is now trading up by about 0.5%. Markets in Asia were somewhat mixed, with Japan recovering a bit while Australia and Hong Kong stocks fell. And turning to the U.S., futures are higher at this hour, with Dow futures, S&Ps and Nasdaq futures all up by about 1.7%. In the bond market, we're looking at a historic 10-year yield below 1%. We are at 0.94% here, down 7 basis points. German bond yields are steady at negative 0.65%. In FX, the dollar mostly flat after 4 days of losses, while the Japanese yen is down 0.2% against the greenback, leading losses in the G10 space. And wrapping things up on the economic front this morning, Germany retail sales were in line with estimates, and so were Spanish composite and services PMIs. And up ahead, we get the final PMI readings for France, Germany, the Eurozone, and the UK. Live from the First and Breaking News Desk, I'm Tatiana Darrier. Roger.
Thanks, Tatiana. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, thank you. Tuesday was super for Joe Biden. The former vice president revived his hopes on the biggest primary night of the Democratic presidential campaign. Biden won 9 states that included upsets in Texas and Massachusetts. Bernie Sanders took the biggest prize of the night. That was California. He also won in Colorado, Utah, and Vermont. Just days ago, though, Sanders seemed to be on the way to an lead. Now Biden has the momentum. The spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank will use a virtual format this year. That's instead of holding the conference in Washington. It comes amid concerns over the global spread of the coronavirus. The two organizations say they're fully committed to maintaining those forums. And Facebook and its partners are considering redesigning the Libra cryptocurrency. The new plan could see the network accept multiple coins, including those issued by central banks. It's an effort to woo reluctant regulators and build momentum for the cryptocurrency. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now, the Fed delivered an intra-meeting emergency rate cut, one that the chair, Jerome Powell, said had to happen amid concerns about the impact of the coronavirus on economic growth. Here's how central bankers have responded across the world.
What really matters, of course, is not the epidemiology, but the risk to the economy. So we saw a risk to the outlook for the economy and chose to act. The Bank of England's role is to help UK businesses and households manage through an economic shock that could prove large but will ultimately be temporary.
Coronavirus has now turned out to be a global problem. So when the problem is global, naturally the need for coordinated action is so much more.
The bank will take all necessary steps to support the UK economy and financial system consistent with its statutory responsibilities. We don't think we have all the answers, but we do believe that our action will provide a meaningful boost to the economy.
And variously there you heard the Fed Chair Jay Powell, the outgoing Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, and the RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das.
For more, let's bring in Sebastian Redler, Head of European Equity Strategy at Merrill Lynch International. Sebastian, great to have you with us in the studio. Looking at your conviction trade, you say it's hard to have conviction, totally fair. You're positioned for bond yields to rise. Does that still stand after the emergency rate cut from the Fed yesterday and the expectation of more from central bankers around the world, including the Fed?
Yes, it does stand, but clearly the uncertainties are very high at the moment. For us, the outlook for bond yields is not so much a function of what central banks do. Because if you analyze, and we have had this discussion before, the main driver of bond yields in Europe and in the US is the rate of change in growth momentum. And the key question we're asking now is, what is growth momentum going to do? How much of a hit are you going to see in addition to the hit you already got in February? Because remember, the China PMI dropped by 17 points to an all-time low. The US PMI is already at a 10-year low. And the question is, how protracted, how long and how large is the impact going to be? On our numbers, we're going to see a slowdown near term, but then improving momentum towards the middle of the year, and that would be consistent with around 50 basis points upside for bond yields and treasury yields. That assumes effectively you're not going into a recession because of this virus outbreak.
It's interesting, we actually got the February final composite PMI just broken here, 52.0, the flash 51.9, January was 51.1. So taking on board what you're saying from that. But looking to the wider impact of the virus, where do you see the sectors most affected, particularly in the equity area?
Well, over the last month, the pattern has been very clear. There have been two clear winners, which is pharma and utility. These are two sectors that are very defensive, that benefit when bond yields fall, when growth momentum slows. Interestingly, they have not just reacted to the fall in bond yields, but have overshot. They are already priced for a sharp further slowdown in the economy, and that simply is, for now, not our base case. So we say there's a lot of already anticipation of a growth slowdown, which, as you say, hasn't happened yet. Then look at the auto sector, for instance. It has underperformed by 20% since November. This is a sector that is already priced for the economy to fall off a cliff. So you basically have to assume this is now a certainty that we are effectively getting into recessionary territory in order for autos to have further downside and utilities to have further upside.
We saw a very negative reaction in the US equity market yesterday to the emergency rate cut from the Fed. A lot of people saying the market just wanted more. Jerome Powell undercut his cut with his words. And also when we get that intra-meeting cut, it usually signals that the cut is happening at a time when a cut is not going to help the underlying situation. Lots of threads to tie together there, but my ultimate question is, how much can equity markets in Europe and the US actually get from central bank action this year?
I think there's a very clear pattern which we saw last year, and I think it's a twofold answer. The first question is, what does central bank action do for the economy, and what does it do for the equity market?
Yes.
And my short answer is, it takes about 1 or 2 years for monetary easing to lead to an improving credit cycle and therefore better growth momentum. There's a long lag which is well established in the data and in the academic research. But for the equity market, it lowers the discount rate. So any macro-driven model of the equity market tells you, if you lower the discount rate, you protect the multiple, and thereby you help valuations. The problem is, though, that if at the same time growth momentum slows sharply, that's always going to overwhelm effectively the support you get from a lower discount rate. So it brings me back to my first statement. What's going to happen to growth momentum? For now, we assume a mild and temporary hit, in which case bond yields will be higher, autos will do well. But clearly, as we said, there are a lot of uncertainties around. And for me, that's more important than what the Fed is going to do.
And we've been talking about what the ECB might do, but a lot of what you're saying, I think, suggests that the room for manoeuvre, the room for any kind of certainly short-term effect is pretty limited. What about the fiscal side? What about what governments can do? We've got a meeting a phone meeting, I think, of Eurozone finance ministers later. What should they be thinking about doing?
You have an economy that is already globally right now the best measure of the global economic cycle. To suggest to you the run rate of the global economy is at a 10-year low. You have significant downside risk from what is now very clearly a threat. I do think the case for a fiscal response is strong. Again, you have some lags coming in there, but effectively for 10 years you have responded to every crisis with a monetary response. As a consequence, you're maxed out on that side. You haven't really used, outside of the US, you really haven't used your fiscal resources. Given the weak run rate of the economy, I think there's a strong case for fiscal stimulus at this point, but we know, especially in the countries that matter, like Germany, there's a very high obstacle course, a very difficult obstacle course to get there, but I think the case is strong and it's getting stronger.
Is the dollar going to weaken further from here? We've had 3 days of declines before today.
Yeah, on our base case scenario of this being temporary, uncertainty. Remember, the story of the dollar for the last 2 years is a 15% rise on the back of uncertainty globally going to an all-time high because of the trade war, which really feels like yesterday's news, but that was really the key catalyst. Because you had the trade deal, uncertainty has plummeted. The dollar started to fall up to the point where you got into this coronavirus situation. If you have a situation where this is temporary, uncertainty continues to decline, and on top of that, you get the Fed rate cuts, which obviously weakens the relative yield attractions for the dollar. That is consistent with a weaker dollar. So as a consequence, we see around 3 to 5% downside for the dollar. But again, uncertainties are high. If you go into a global recession and you trigger renewed safe haven demand, that could undercut that narrative.
And briefly, whether the dollar, whether the euro in these circumstances, you see some interesting moves in that.
Yeah, so for us, we run a model of the broad dollar trade weighted, which is what I was just referring to. That's the key determinant of the euro dollar. If that scenario, or central scenario of the dollar being 3% weaker comes true, then the euro fades closer to 150.
You're neutral on European equities right now. Do you see them underperforming US equities as we look ahead to the global response to coronavirus?
In our base case scenario, we have effectively been negative on European equities relative to the US for the last 3 years or so. We've just turned neutral after a very heavy bout of underperformance recently. So in our central scenario, around which we've obviously have a broad band of uncertainty now, we've got a little bit of implied near-term upside followed by renewed underperformance. So over the next couple of months, we are neutral effectively for the first time in 3 years.
Sebastian, thanks very much. Sebastian Redler, the head of European Equity Strategy at Merrill Lynch International, joining us live in the studio. One figure come across the terminal in the last few minutes. Germany, February services PMI 52.5, the prelim was 53.3.
If we look at the equity markets, we're actually on a third day in the green in Europe now, extending gains up almost 0.7% on Europe's equity benchmark. We're also seeing US futures point higher, but that seems to be largely on the Super Tuesday results. Of course, we saw a bad session in US equities yesterday, down more than 3% following the emergency rate cut from the Fed. Futures up at least 1.7% right now. The 10-year yield continues to slide. This is Bloomberg.
No company. Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
The famous five were discussing their next adventure to Cardiff. Let's visit the Millennium Centre, said Dick. The National Museum, added Julian. The castle, cried Anne. Dick jumped up. We'd better leave now. Cardiff's so far away. Relax, said George. It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas. London to Cardiff in as little as 1 hour 42 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Cardiff Central. Terms and conditions apply.
The financial capital of the world. 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
We look at the data for you on these markets every 15 minutes, so let's do that. And actually, let's start with some breaking news on Eurozone PMIs. This for the month of February. Services PMI coming in at 52.6 against a preliminary number of 52.8, so a touch below or broadly in line. I'm not sure how much the beginning of February matters to people right now in markets, though. So much has changed in the market's expectations and investors and business expectations, perhaps, with regards to how big coronavirus gets for the global economy. So anyway, take that for what it's worth. February services PMI still well above 50, but slightly below the preliminary number. Let's talk about the equity markets, though, where we are on that particular risk asset, Matt. More positive than we were at a couple of minutes into trade, it would seem. So the Stock 600 up by 0.8%, the FTSE 100 up just shy of 1%, the CAC 40 up 0.7%, the Xetra up around 0.8%. So we're seeing some buoyancy to European equity markets. US futures point even higher, up by 1.7 to 1.9% on the major indexes. Of course, we saw markets in the United States losing considerable ground in yesterday's session. In fact, the major index is down nearly 3% by the close, so a bit of catch-up being played in the United States. Interesting to see a couple of factors going on here. We had, of course, the emergency measures from the Fed yesterday, 50 basis points of rate cuts. Was the selling in the wake of that, the fears about the impotence of central banks, was that overdone? Or are we seeing markets going higher today because Joe Biden did better in the Super Tuesday Democratic nominations votes than had been anticipated, and so Biden's seen as a slightly more market-friendly candidate for the Democrats than Bernie Sanders. Anyway, that is that's a wrap of a number of factors that are sort of going into equity markets right now. Let's just check oil prices. They are also higher, along with those other risk assets, so $52 a barrel on Brent. We don't see just risk on, though, in markets, do we, Matt? Because investors are also buying treasuries, and the yield on the US treasuries below 1%. What is that, an all-time low, 150-year low?
Yeah, 150-year low. I mean, it is an all-time low. It's just that we only have data going back to when Ulysses S. Grant was in the White House. So we can see that we'd never had 10-year lending from the U.S. government. Well, before that, we're not sure what the rates were. But I think it's interesting, Anna, that you see, if you look across the graphs, you do see equity indexes continue to rise throughout the trading session. And if you put the U.S. 10-year yield aside, bunds are coming back a little bit in terms of the yield. You see bund yields climbing back up from a dip earlier in the session. You see the U.S. dollar climbing up against the yen, and you see gold starting to deteriorate, the price of gold starting to fall a little. So it does look pretty risk on until you look at the U.S. Treasury yield. And I guess maybe investors have learned their lesson. When you thought there was a bottom in for Treasury yields, every time the rug's been pulled out of you from under you for the last, for my entire lifetime, really. Almost my entire life, Treasury yields have just come down, down, down.
Yes, and certainly we asked a guest from JP Morgan a little bit earlier on where the bottom is, and he gave some very knowledgeable thoughts, but it was, at first, there was a shrug, because who knows right now. Now, let's talk about where we are on the coronavirus story, though, because that's really all markets care about at the moment. The total amount of coronavirus cases around the world has risen past 93,000, and according to the WHO, the global fatality rate has now reached 3.4%. That compares to seasonal flu, which generally kills far fewer than 1% of those infected. Let's get some important context and caveats, no doubt, though, from Bloomberg's health reporter, John Lauerman, who I'm pleased to say joins us here. John, this number from the WHO, 3.4% from the WHO, really catching our attention because previously we'd been hearing 1% maybe, but you can't be too sure because there's uncertainty around certainly around the denominator in that particular calculation. Where's this 3.4% number coming from? Because that's quite alarming.
Well, we actually did the math on this morning. The number just comes from, again, dividing the number of people who have died from the disease from those who have tested positive. And the interesting thing to note is that a lot of countries approach this testing process very differently. Some countries are very aggressive in testing, others are not so aggressive. We've talked to people who have symptoms, they think that they've been exposed to somebody, they've been said, look, we don't want to test you unless you get respiratory distress, unless you get very, very sick. So, in other words, what that means is we don't really know right now how many people have been exposed to the virus. We don't know how many people are infected with it. And that's going to take some new tests, what they call serological tests, where you are able to test people for antibodies to the virus. That shows whether you've ever been exposed, and we don't have those tests yet. So just as you were saying, we have this, we know exactly how many people have died, or relatively anyway, because it's pretty obvious when somebody dies, and then you can test them and find out whether they had it. What we don't know is how many people have actually, been in contact.
So we treat with caution.
Exactly. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Matt.
I think Anna, you know that I think the number should be a little higher here, because you don't die the second you test positive for coronavirus, right? It takes presumably a week or two before you die from this. So the number of deaths should be divided into the number of people who tested positive 2 weeks ago.
But then you can also take longer than a couple of weeks to recover. So that's also it's difficult with a virus that seems to last so long. Difficult to compare numerators and denominators that match.
John, how long does this virus...
Just to go back to your point, Matt, so you're not just looking at the number of people cumulatively who have died or who have tested positive. Both of those numbers are cumulative. So, I really think actually the case fatality rate as it is not a bad approximation.
What I wonder is, and this is because of my ignorance, I guess, in virology, but I heard a story about an American who tested positive. He'd gone to a high school basketball game on a Saturday, and then on Monday they were scouring the gymnasium with bleach. And I thought, that's kind of silly, because how long is a virus going to live on the hardwood, But apparently some coronaviruses can live up to 9 days out in the open. What do we think about this coronavirus? Because if it lives that long, then I start to wonder, an Amazon employee got it. Well, what about all the people that he shipped packages to? Or if I have it and I give somebody 10 euros for a beer, that note is going to continue to go around, and maybe everyone's going to get it from that.
Yeah, so, the question of how long a particular virus lives on surfaces is a really interesting one. And you think about some of the viruses, for example, norovirus is one of the ones that lives on surfaces for a long time. And that's the cruise ship virus that you probably heard about before.
Vomiting virus.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it causes kind of what they call like a stomach flu, that sort of thing. Often food poisoning is often blamed on norovirus. That lives on surfaces for a long time. We still don't know how long this particular virus persists. Again, if it were like living on every, surface for 9 days, would that sort of show up in the statistics that we've seen so far? And there's also the potential for a virus to live on a surface for a long time, but you can't get a dose from it that would be infectious.
Right.
So there's two issues.
Okay. John, thank you very much. Lots more to learn about this virus. Seems to be the conclusion often. Bloomberg's health reporter, John Lauerman.
All right, let's get over to Moritz Kramer right now. He's with us on Bloomberg Television. He's come with me into my tiny little radio studio here in Berlin. He is the chief economic advisor at Accreditus. Moritz, what do you think about the impact of this virus? With what we know so far, how sure is it to drive, the European economy into a recession?
Well, unfortunately, we know fairly little, and what John just explained to us is a reminder of that. So this is uncharted territory. So any prediction that we will make, either on the medical side or on the economic side, is in a cloud of particularly pronounced uncertainty. But from what we can see today, and in Europe, we're still sort of starting to get infection numbers going up and spreading from country to country. And if you already look at the reactions, here in Berlin, for example, This is, compared to what it should be, it's almost like a ghost town, because very big events have been called off, like the biggest tourism fair. I mean, everything is being called off left, right, and center. People are working from home. Some shifts are being reduced. So this is bound to have a pretty significant impact on economic activity.
Yeah, we just saw a headline crossing. The ECB is restricting all non-essential travel until April 20th. Of course, we heard from J.P. Morgan has done this, the Ford Motor Company. You mentioned the travel mesa here, but also the Geneva Motor Show was canceled. Formula One canceled a race. Rugby was canceled. MotoGP is canceled. I mean, it's incredible. Everything's just frozen.
Yeah, and I think the ECB news is particularly interesting because they should be in the business of trying to reassure markets a little bit. And they're saying, okay, we're going to sort of hunker down onto our premises. No one's going to leave the building. This doesn't sound too promising at all. We'll see more about what they're thinking next Thursday when they have the next policy meeting. But from what we're seeing today, I would be pretty surprised if we were not sort of coming to the edge of recession in the Eurozone overall, possibly going into the recession sort of towards the middle of the year, because this has a long sort of lag time, these effects. And countries like Italy, you can almost count on being in recession. Germany probably as well, because of its particularly high exposure to trade and supply chain network effects with China. It's not catastrophic, right? But it's a recession, and this is so psychologically undermining. If you have a potential growth rate of 1%, as I think the Eurozone more or less has, you just dip into recession every now and then. That's just what happens. I wouldn't be too worried about it per se, but the uncertainty in the context, and this has the risk of self-reinforcing sort of fear factors, and really the transparency here in dealing with this is absolutely critical, so that people trust the authorities in their pronouncements and in their predictions.
All right, Moritz, thanks for sticking around, joining us for a little bit here on radio. Moritz Kramer there, chief economic advisor, I should say, at Accreditus.
Thanks very much to Moritz Kramer. Let's get the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans, and you start with Joe Biden's campaign comeback in the United States.
Yes, good morning, Anna. Let's start with Super Tuesday, and it was super for Joe Biden. The former vice president revived his hopes on the biggest primary night of the Democratic presidential campaign. Despite this, Bernie Sanders took the biggest prize of the night. That was California. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has that story.
Both sides can and will claim victories. For Joe Biden, winning Texas was a major deal. His message, unity.
We need to bring everybody along. We want a nominee who will beat Donald Trump.
For Sanders, taking the big fish, California, is good for bragging, and he says a groundswell.
What makes this movement unique is we are taking on the corporate establishment.
Progressive and moderate forms coming to shape. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now in other news, Japan says it could be possible to delay this summer's Tokyo Olympics to later in the year. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds says that comes amid fears that the coronavirus outbreak could cause the games to be cancelled altogether.
Seiko Hashimoto told Parliament Japan was doing all it could to make sure the International Olympic Committee would judge it safe to hold the event starting July 24th as planned. But she said the terms under which Tokyo was awarded the Games did not seem to rule out a few months of delay. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank will use a virtual format this year. That's instead of holding the conference in Washington. It comes amid concerns over the global spread of coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrett.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Paul Allen.
Now, despite President Trump's claims that his administration is ready for the coronavirus in the U.S., there is mounting concern that the government is grossly underprepared. So let's take a look at the situation now with Dr. Caitlin Rivers. She's Professor of Epidemiology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. So, Dr. Rivers, thanks for joining us. What is your assessment of U.S. preparedness for this?
I'm pleased that diagnostic capacity in the United States has expanded this week and will continue to expand in the coming days. I do think that will mean that we will identify more cases in the United States, which might feel alarming, but it's really us just catching up to the current situation and getting a better understanding of that epidemiological situation.
Are enough tests available?
Yes, they are coming online. About half of state and local public health testing laboratories now have capacity to test, and I understand the rest of them will be coming online this week. That will bring us to about 10,000 tests a day if things run smoothly.
What's your best guess? How many Americans do you think actually are infected by this virus that we don't know about?
It's impossible to say, and that's why it is so important that we have testing capacity. And that's why I think we will see more cases in the coming days and weeks, because there has been transmission likely happening that we haven't observed.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So although the markets didn't seem satisfied with the Fed's emergency 0.5% rate cut yesterday, certainly in the US, in Europe, it seems to have boosted some optimism that there may be central bank action elsewhere in the world, perhaps at the ECB. The Euro Stoxx 600 up by 0.7% this hour. The Xetra DAX up similarly. The CAC Current up by 0.8%. In terms of the bond markets, we are still below 1% for the benchmark 10-year Treasury yield, down 6 basis points this morning, trading at spot 94 basis points. German yields and negative 63 basis points. Not such a significant move, though. Pretty much flat for the German Bund yield. Gilts, though, down 4 basis points at spot 35 basis points. In terms of the rest of the markets, no doubt the ECB will be eyeing the euro, which trades at 1 spot 11.61, so weak at 0.1%, when it considers perhaps taking any action about coronavirus. In terms of the oil markets, WTI crude oil up by 0.2% at $47.29 the barrel. This is OPEC Plus and the committee a recommendation for a larger supply cut from the major oil producers. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning. I just want to start with some breaking news this hour. We've heard a London worker is suspected to have coronavirus. That's an oil trader at Unipec, and we'll bring you more on that information as we get it throughout the morning. Now an update on the coronavirus. According to reports from around the world, over 50,000 people have now recovered from the virus or been released from hospital. That's as the total number of infections has risen above 93,000. At least 80% of the cases are mild, similar to regular flu. Now, in the US, Senator Bernie Sanders has won the biggest prize of Super Tuesday, California, in the Democratic primaries. But former Vice President Joe Biden has staged a stunning comeback, winning 9 states, including Texas. And one of the biggest upsets of the night was Biden winning Massachusetts. It's a blow for Sanders, who had been expected to win there, and to the state senator rival Elizabeth Warren. And at least one Turkish soldier has been killed in Syria, increasing tensions between Turkey and Russia. President Erdogan is scheduled to travel to Moscow on Thursday in the hopes of convincing President Putin to rein in his Syrian allies and agree to a Turkish-controlled safe zone. Turkey bombed Syrian army targets after the attack on its soldiers late on Tuesday, which also wounded 9 of its troops. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Daniel Moss, who's writing about how the Fed's emergency interest rate cut Tuesday is encouraging Asian officials to keep their feet on the gas in the race towards zero. Dan, thanks for joining us. So, ex-Japan, central banks in the Asian region have been cutting, and you're saying this move by the Fed gives them cover to continue.
It gives them cover to continue, Matt. The point I was trying to make is these guys don't need a shove. Merely a nudge will do it. And the reason is interest rates were heading inexorably lower in this region for at least the past year. That reflects 2 things. One, the relentless downward march of inflation. Sounds like the rest of the world, doesn't it? And 2, the region's economic patron, China, was faltering before anyone ever heard of the city of Wuhan.
Yes, indeed. Do you think that we're concluding that wherever you are in Asia, in the US and elsewhere, wherever this coronavirus is going to have an impact on the economy, which is what we're talking about here, rate cuts are a necessary but not sufficient tool in the economic fight against the virus?
They certainly are not going to hurt. Now, if you listen to Jay Powell's press conference yesterday, all 13 minutes of it, he was the first to say, look, we're not necessarily the first line of defense. That's healthcare. Fiscal needs to play a role, though that's not his business. Monetary policy can't do everything. It can do something. You know, all these arguments that have been voguish for the last few years that, oh, they're out of room and, oh, it's time for fiscal policy. That's great. That's all true. No one's denying that. Is that an excuse not to use what room you do have left?
What do you see, Dan, or what's your take on the likelihood that the U.S. gets to zero?
Well, you know, Matt, it's not all that long ago in historical terms that the U.S. effectively was at zero. It was only during the period where Janet Yellen presided at the Fed that QE was finally put to bed. It's worth noting that one place that's won plaudits for supposedly killing the business cycle, Australia, is actually headed toward QE. It's barreling toward QE. 28 years without a recession, that's great. So what? Guess what? Your economy is still slowing and inflation is nowhere near your target. The cut Tuesday from the Reserve Bank took Australia to within a quarter point of the threshold at which the governor has said QE has to be considered. So much for Nirvana. So much for Nirvana.
In the Australian model, or in the model that we see used by central banks in Asia, then will there be more QE in the mold that we have known it in the past? I mean, maybe this requires innovation, new tools. This is about supporting small and medium-sized businesses with cash flow problems.
Well, one truly fascinating thing about the prospect of zero and then the countenancing of QE in this region is, with the exception of Japan, there really aren't the kind of large, liquid, sovereign bond markets that you find in the United States, the United Kingdom, or the Eurozone. This would be an experiment outside the northern industrial-based economies. We've never been here before. This is quite fascinating.
All right, Dan, thanks very much for joining us. Dan Moss is an opinion columnist. You can check out the work of Dan, his other columns, or of his colleagues by typing OPINGO on the Bloomberg terminal.
Straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, the Fed delivers an emergency 50 basis point rate cut amid concerns about the impact of coronavirus. We've been talking about that quite a bit so far already this morning. Now traders turn their sights to Europe and whether other central banks will follow suit. We got thoughts from one guest a little bit earlier on. We'll go live to Frankfurt to discuss ECB stimulus next. This is Bloomberg.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The NBA has told players to avoid high-fiving fans and strangers and avoid taking any items for autographs as the league responds to the coronavirus. The league, in a memo sent to teams and obtained by the Associated Press, offered 10 recommendations to players with hopes of decreasing risks of getting the virus. Among them, not taking items such as pens, markers, balls, and jerseys from autograph seekers. Federal prosecutors and investigators conducting a wide-ranging criminal probe of U.S. Olympic sports are said to have interviewed the parents of star American gymnasts, including Simone Biles, as they explore whether there were financial improprieties involving the former head of USA Gymnastics. People familiar with the investigation told Dow Jones the gymnasts' parents have told investigators that Steve Penny had sought to act as Biles' agent. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At Eisner Amper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at eisneramper.com/.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres, ends 18th of March.
Take the next left, take a right, and you've arrived at your Vauxhall retailer, where you'll find the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. Test drive now and you can take advantage of a £500 deposit contribution with 4.9% APR representative. Book your test drive of the all-new Corsa now. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. £500 allowance provided as deposit contribution on qualifying new Vauxhalls. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status, T's and C's, 18 plus Vauxhall Finance. Registered by 2nd of April 2020. Search Vauxhall Test Drive.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards here in London. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Let's take a quick look at the data here. In terms of the equity indexes, it's been a decent session. We started out in the positive, dipped slightly, but have since been climbing really across the board. And we're looking at gains of more than 1% on the FTSE, 75 points added there to 67.94. The DAX is up 103 points to 12,089, and the CAC gaining 58 to 54.50 in total. We do see elsewhere some risk-on signals with the dollar strengthening against the yen to 107.457 and gold weakening to $1,636.80 a troy ounce. But the U.S. 10-year yield continues to fall and right now is trading at just 94.9 basis points, so 0.949. Hitting the lowest level of all time, as it fell below 1% for the first time ever. And we're looking at oil, by the way, that has dipped this morning, but is coming back a little bit ahead of the OPEC meeting in Vienna right now. A barrel of Brent crude is trading for $52.10. So there's a quick look for you at your data. We check it every 15 minutes.
Yeah, we also get across the breaking news, and we've got a red headline on the Bloomberg terminal. UK February services PMI 53.2. That's pretty much in line with the preliminary number, just a touch below. But really, a lot of this is fairly backward-looking, isn't it, when it comes to assessing where the UK growth story is, where the global growth story is, because early February might not be all that relevant to how businesses feel, the outlook they're seeing, the supply disruption and demand story that they report right now might look quite different to the one at the beginning of February, where people thought more convincingly that coronavirus would be a Chinese or perhaps an Asian phenomenon economically. Anyway, we've moved on from that, but there's the data for what it is worth. Let's talk about how policymakers react here. A surprise cut is what we saw yesterday. The Fed delivered an intra-meeting emergency rate cut amid concerns about the impact of the coronavirus on global growth. And now the question is, how fast will other central banks follow suit? For one, Commerzbank's chief economist is expecting the ECB to cut rates by 10 basis points next week. I saw that S&P were also suggesting a 10 basis points cut. Let's get now to Frankfurt, where Bloomberg's Jana Randau is standing by. Jana, what are you expecting then from the ECB?
It's difficult to envisage them to do nothing at all. So I'm sure we will see a response. The question is, how big a response are we going to see? President Christine Lagarde has already pledged an appropriate and targeted response to the crisis, and that for me hints that whatever they do will actually be a lot smaller in size than what we saw from the Fed yesterday, partially also because the ECB simply does not have the same kind of policy space that the Fed has. The deposit rate is at minus 0.5% already, and policymakers so far have been reluctant to cut it further. Now, if the crisis obviously warrants significant action, then there is room to do so, but I at the moment would not necessarily bet on it. It could be a small rate cut. Overall, if you want, it could be some form of liquidity support. We'll just have to see.
And Moritz Kramer from Accreditus was on with us a few moments ago, Jana, and he said one of the concerns for Christine Lagarde is that she's currently, going through this Cinderella period of sorts and doesn't want to make either side angry in terms of the hawks and the doves on the committee, and wants to sort of bring them together. One of her main goals, right? The divided board that we saw at the end of Mario Draghi's term. How do you think she's dealing with that?
I think you're right. It is very challenging for her, and in the end, the situation needs to speak for itself. So if the economic data we see, if the situation in financial markets we see really warrants a response, I don't think anyone will stand in the way. And we've heard policymakers, including Jens Weidmann, say, we are very carefully monitoring the situation. If there is any need to act, that's exactly what we're going to do. What the challenge is to judge the severity of the situation and decide when you actually want to act and how big you want to go in. And I think that is what they will discuss at length at their meeting next week. It's scheduled for Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll just have to see where how the crisis develops until then, and how severe it is, and what the ECB actually decides it is able to do.
Yes. And also I guess we expect, Jana, just briefly, to keep hearing from the ECB that they want fiscal policy to also play a role.
Exactly. I mean, they've been very clear, even before the outbreak of the coronavirus, in saying fiscal policy needs to step up. Whatever government has fiscal space should use it wisely, and they have been stressing that very point since the virus broke out and has affected large parts of the region. They will probably look very carefully at what the Eurogroup will do this afternoon. They have a teleconference scheduled for 2:00 Brussels time. I wouldn't expect a massive strategy being laid out, but it's surely an opportunity for finance ministers to take stock, to share information about what's happening in their respective countries, and to also outline and keep others informed about the very national responses that they have up their sleeves and that are in the works. Bruno Le Maire, the French finance minister, has said he expects a coordinated and strong response at the Euro area level. Whether we see that today, I would doubt it. But the Eurogroup also has another meeting scheduled in a little under 2 weeks' time. So maybe until then we will be learning what might come out of Brussels.
Hopefully that's a teleconference as well. I guess the silver lining of this is that we're doing so much. Well, we're not doing as much damage to the environment as we previously were flying to all these meetings. Jana, thanks so much for joining us. Jana Randau covers the ECB for us from Frankfurt.
There's certainly a feature on silver linings, because I was hearing from some of our colleagues in Hong Kong who'd been housebound that they were learning to cook much more than previously, which is another unintended consequence. Right, for the latest in global news, let's get to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Anna, good morning. Let's start in the US. Senator Bernie Sanders has won the biggest prize of Super Tuesday, that's California. But former Vice President Joe Biden has staged a stunning comeback, winning 9 states, including Texas.
For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just a few days ago, the press and the pundits had declared the campaign dead.
Meanwhile, one of the biggest upsets of the night was Joe Biden winning Massachusetts. It's a blow to Sanders, who had been expected to win there. Now, here in the UK, an employee of Unipec based in London is suspected of contracting coronavirus. The Chinese oil trading giant is monitoring the situation very closely following the guidance of international and local health authorities. Staff are being requested to work from home until further notice. Last week, Chevron asked employees in London to work from home while it tested a staff member who was unwell. That person was found not to have contracted the virus. Let's stay in Europe. While the EU is pledging €700 million in aid to help Greece discourage migrants at the border with Turkey, officials have visited Bulgaria and Greece to assess that situation, calling for order after violence over the weekend. European Council President Charles Michel promised to stand by Athens.
My message is very clear. You can count on the European solidarity. In case of necessity, we will be present, we will be active and committed to support you.
And elsewhere, the European Commission will today unveil key legislation to enable its goal of becoming the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo reports.
The climate law will make emission reduction targets legally binding for member states, and it will also offer clarity for investors looking to put money in the green space in Europe. For Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, this is a cornerstone policy and a key priority, but the question remains, just how ambitious is Europe willing to go when it comes to reducing emissions? In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much for that, Leanne Gerrans with the world news. Let's get an update on European sports. Here's Lewis Mason.
Chelsea have beaten Liverpool 2-0 to secure their place in the FA Cup quarter-finals and inflict a third defeat in 4 games on Jurgen Klopp's team. Newcastle survived a late fight back from West Brom to win 3-2 at the Hawthorns after taking a 3-0 lead. Billy Sharp's extra-time winner sent Sheffield United through to the next round with a 2-1 win against Reading. Hearts are off the bottom of the Scottish Premiership after beating rivals Hibernian 3-1 in the Edinburgh Derby. England manager Gareth Southgate has thrown his support behind goalkeeper Jordan Pickford after a string of errors for Everton. Southgate's side have been drawn to face Belgium, Iceland and Denmark in the Nations League. The games will run from September to November, with the finals taking place next summer.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Chief Revenue Officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? CohnReznick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at CohnReznick.com/MLB. CohnReznick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The news you need from across the globe on Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us today at 5 a.m. on Bloomberg Daybreak.
We'll have complete results and reaction to Super Tuesday voting with Wendy Schiller at Brown University.
And we'll keep on top of the markets following the Fed's emergency rate move.
Bloomberg Daybreak. Weekday mornings at 5, followed by Bloomberg Surveillance at 7 on Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European global headquarters in New York, I'm Hammer Herder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Let's start in New York now. We have futures in the U.S. pointing to a much firmer start. S&P 500 futures up more than 2%. This comes after yesterday. All three major indices here in the U.S. closed down nearly 3% when the Fed's emergency rate cut came out. It was taken to the negative side, many saying that the Fed would need to do more. Maybe markets now looking at a more coordinated stimulus from around the world. South Korea held an emergency meeting. Bank of Canada poised to do something today, and the S&P is also expecting the ECB to act. In Europe, all major indices are up more than 1% this morning. This comes after we had some pretty decent service PMI numbers, although there should be some bumps ahead inevitably. The U.S. 10-year yield, though, touching record lows yesterday. Right now, we trade at spot 9.49% on that 10-year yield. We also should mention it was Super Tuesday yesterday. This is the morning after. Markets could be taking in stride the fact that the U.S. presidential primary candidate for the Democratic Party, we have a friendlier Joe Biden staging this comeback. In commodities, we do have gold staging a comeback as well alongside Biden, more than $1,600 an ounce. That big win for Powell's emergency cut was gold, and those gains extended into Asia, into European as well. And then oil on the front foot this morning. OPEC's technical committee recommending deeper cuts, not just 600,000 barrels a day. They're now saying maybe 1 million barrels a day. Will it be enough to prop up those markets, though? That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's Leanne Garrett with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne, good morning in London.
Anne-Marie, good morning in New York. Now, Tuesday was super for Joe Biden. The former vice president revived his hopes on the biggest primary night of the Democratic presidential campaign. Biden won 9 states. That included upsets in Texas and Massachusetts. Bernie Sanders took the biggest prize of the night. That was California. He also won in Colorado, Utah, and Vermont. Just days ago, though, Sanders seemed to be on the way to a lead, but now Biden has the momentum. An update on the coronavirus. According to reports from around the world, over 50,000 people have now recovered from the virus or indeed have been released from hospital. That's as a total number of infections has risen above 93,000. At least 80% of the cases are mild, similar to regular flu. And the Tokyo Olympics could be postponed because of the coronavirus. That's the word from Japan's Olympics minister. He says it's possible to move the games to a later date this year. Right now, the Tokyo Olympics is set to begin on July the 24th. It's estimated that Japan has spent a whopping $26 billion on the event. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
Leanne, thank you very much for that. Now let's get over to Nathan Hager. He is in the U.S. prepping for Daybreak Americas, which follows this program on Sirius XM. Nathan, what do you got planned?
Well, we are still watching the results roll in from Super Tuesday, but it is safe to say it was a heck of a night for Joe Biden. Coming back for his campaign in states where he'd been all but written off less than a week ago. We have an A-team of analysts to look at where the Democratic race stands now. Terry Haynes from Pangea Policy, Greg Vallier over at AGF Investments, Wendy Schiller from Brown University. They will all join us for post-Super Tuesday analysis. Of course, we are watching the market reaction to the election result. Investors certainly seem to like what they're seeing with Joe Biden staging that comeback, but we'll see whether it's a long-lived comeback following the Fed's emergency rate cut that sent stocks on a roller coaster yesterday. We're going to check in with economist Dennis Gartman and Daniel Morris of BNP Paribas on what markets are looking for next to blunt the effects of the coronavirus. Lots coming up for me and Karen Moscow. Hope you'll join us for it on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
Very much looking forward to it. Nathan, thanks very much. Nathan Hager coming up next with Karen Moscow. If you're tuned in on Sirius XM, good morning. If you're tuned in on London DAB Digital, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix.
Let's pick up on one of the things mentioned there by Nathan, and that is the Fed cutting rates in a bid to stem the economic impact of the coronavirus. But the emergency move seems to have unnerved markets by signaling that it's unclear how long the outbreak will last. For more, let's bring in John Normand, head of cross-asset fundamental strategy at JP Morgan Chase. Good morning to you, John.
Hi, good morning.
I'm sure we're all unclear about how long the outbreak lasts and the path it takes, the damage it does to various economies around the world. But what was your takeaway from the Fed and the market's response to it yesterday?
So to me, the takeaway is, number one, the Fed is incredibly anxious about something that it can't predict, which is this infection rate. And number two, the Fed is under no delusions that it has a lot of policy space to deal with whatever hit comes to the economy over the next couple of quarters. So I think both of those issues are pretty worrisome, that they can't project the extent of the damage and they don't have a lot of policy flexibility to handle it.
Did they have to bring rates down, though? I mean, you don't want, if R-star to the neutral rate lowers because of slowing economic growth, to then have constrictive policy.
I thought it was a hasty move because, number one, not every part of financial conditions in the U.S. was tightening. It was actually loosening in the high-grade credit markets because the all-in cost of borrowing was going down on account of the big rally in treasuries this month. And number two, there really hasn't been any notable damage to the U.S. economy from the coronavirus. So I think they could have waited a bit longer and possibly coupled this with some coordinated action from other central banks or from the fiscal authorities in the U.S. So they sort of wasted an opportunity to create a shock and awe sort of announcement by acting, essentially alone and not really in a crisis moment.
There might be limits to what central banks can do here, John, but it certainly looked last week like somebody needed to do something to put in some kind of circuit breaker. And it was an expectation, a hope that somebody in the G7 would do something that shored up markets at the beginning of this week. So I suppose if the Fed had been nowhere to be seen, we might have continued selling even more.
True,
or do you think we just postponed it?
Well, I think there's a problem with bigging up the idea of coordinated central bank action and not actually delivering that coordinated action. It sort of highlights that these conclaves of policymakers are sometimes just for show rather than for some kind of material response. And I think that's the problem that's been created with the way the messaging has differed from the actual policy changes between last week and this week. It will, I think, encourage investors to really dismiss what policymakers say going forward.
Do you think other central banks are going to follow suit here, though? I mean, I just saw that HSBC now sees the Bank of England rates being cut by 25 basis points on or before March 26th. The sense that maybe we could see other emergency measures come through.
Yes, I think that's guaranteed. It's a question of degree in various countries, depending on where rates are, and also what policy tools their mandate allows them to really deploy. And I think the ECB is interesting in that the ECB probably has the most flexibility to buy whatever asset they like. The problem, of course, is that rates are already at a low level, but at least if you're talking about a central bank that can provide something targeted to corporates through repo operations, through purchases of corporate bonds, the ECB can do that better than a lot of other central banks.
Do you think we're going to see any fiscal stimulus forthcoming or tax cuts? Does that make sense to you here, John?
It makes complete sense, but the extent to which that's delivered depends on the political composition of governments in various countries. So the UK has no issue deploying fiscal stimulus in size because there's a parliamentary majority for the Conservatives. In the US, it's pretty much impossible to deliver meaningful fiscal stimulus given the divide in Congress. But at least thankfully in a lot of emerging markets, you can have that fiscal support, and that's definitely what's going on in China. I think that's one of the reasons why activity started to normalize there, and the stock market there is outperforming other stock markets. So it's really a country by country call.
Are you starting to get any kind of assessment for when we see what the months ahead look like? I was listening to the press conference yesterday from the UK Prime Minister, and he was flanked by two medical experts, and they were talking about a ramp up for 2 to 3 months, then an outbreak a sort of peak that lasts a few weeks, and then a decline that also takes 2 to 3 months. You're talking about basically 6 months where this is going to dominate, or at least it dominates for the first 4 of those.
Exactly. I think everyone's base case is to see this as, a standard respiratory illness. There's a known kind of epidemic curve over time. There's a run up for a couple of months and then a deceleration. But to the extent that this may be a different kind of respiratory disease, you shouldn't have a lot of confidence that that's going to be the shape of the wave over the next few months. What we do observe is that outbreaks are just simply moving from one country to the next. And so until, I guess, the last economically significant country experiences a peak in its outbreak, you really don't cease to see this issue as a market issue. So this is going to drag on well into the spring.
Is this the end of the bull market for stocks, John?
I don't think so. I don't think you have the underlying leverage problem across the U.S. private sector to allow the shock from the virus to give you a recession. So as long as we don't see the end of the recession, as long as we don't see the start of a recession, I don't think you see the end of the bull market. What I'm quite concerned about is that, yet again, policy space is being used to deal with a short-term issue. And so when the final shock or the definitive shock happens, whether that's in a year's time or 2 years' time, I wonder how the Fed's going to deal with this if the policy rate is already at 75 basis points, having had to ease 3 times to deal with the virus.
John, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us. John Normand, Head of Cross-Asset Fundamental Strategy at JP Morgan Chase. Really good to get his thoughts on that. We've been talking about lower bond yields, certainly Treasury yields. I see that the UK 10-year bond yield, so this is the gilt yield, has fallen to a record low of 0.338. This, of course, all on bets of Bank of England easing to come.
Yeah, a lot of superlatives in these markets as the U.S. 10-year yield trades at 93 basis points. By the way, if you want to catch more from John Normand, he's about to go on Bloomberg Surveillance. You will hear that if you're tuned in on London DAB Digital. If you're tuned in on Sirius XM, good morning. It's time for Daybreak Americas.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, March 4th, 2020. Coming up this hour,
Joe Biden stages a comeback on Super Tuesday.
Those have been knocked down, counted out, left behind. This is your campaign.
U.S. futures climb after Biden's surprise win, though volatility remains high.
And the Fed's emergency rate cut fails to ease concerns about a global downturn.
Candidates are reassessing their presidential bids after Super Tuesday. Plus, could the coronavirus delay the Tokyo Summer Olympics? I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower on sports. Huge comeback by the Nets. They won in overtime in Boston. Rangers, Islanders, and Devils all lost. Rutgers upset Maryland.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. With a 50-year history of innovation, SEI's outsourced solutions help achieve lasting success for investment managers, asset owners, private banks, and independent advisors. Learn more at SEIC.com.
And U.S. futures are rebounding from yesterday's sharp declines as bond yields around the world continue to fall. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are up 56 points, Dow futures up 530, and NASDAQ futures up 170. The DAX in Germany is up 0.9%, CAC in Paris up 1.1%, and the FTSE 100 up 1.2%, and the 10-year Treasury up 18/30 seconds. The yield 0.93%. Nathan.
Karen, we begin this morning with results from Super Tuesday, where Joe Biden made a remarkable comeback on the biggest primary night of the campaign. Biden won 9 states, including upsets in Texas and Massachusetts.
For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
Biden also won Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama, and Minnesota, while Bernie Sanders took the biggest prize of the night with a victory in California.
We're going to win because the people understand it is our campaign, our movement, which is best positioned to defeat Trump.
Sanders also picked up wins in Colorado, Utah, and his home state of Vermont. So far, the race has yet to be called in Maine. The results all but narrow the race to 2 candidates after disappointing showings for Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg.
Now, the latest poll shows Biden with 453 delegates, while Sanders has 382, though it could take days to count all the votes in California. We get more from Bloomberg Washington Bureau Chief Craig Gordon.
Joe Biden had a really good night, but California, 415 delegates, by far the biggest prize of the night. And if Bernie Sanders does as well there as the poll suggests, he could come away with a lion's share of those delegates.
Still, the night belonged to Joe Biden after starting his campaign with disappointing showings in Iowa and New Hampshire. Bloomberg contributor Rick Davis puts the night in perspective.
South Carolina, the big win that gave him this opportunity was a record turnout, surpassing 2008, which was the high water mark at that point in time. And now we're seeing states like Virginia hitting also high water marks in turnout. It's not just an accident. It is a phenomenon.
When it comes to other candidates, Elizabeth Warren came away from the night with 50 delegates after losing her home state to Biden, and Michael Bloomberg claimed 44 after a win in American Samoa. So far, neither candidate is conceding, and we should note that Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio.
U.S. futures rose overnight as Super Tuesday results rolled in, but volatility remains high after yesterday's 780-point plunge for the Dow. So where do we go from here? We asked Guggenheim Chief Investment Officer Scott Meinert.
I see another 15% decline, maybe even more from where we are right now in stocks. And when I turn to the bond market, I think that we're going to continue to see the Fed have to ease. And I believe that our target of 25 basis points on the 10-year note and 1% on the long bond are almost inevitable at this point.
Well, right now the yield on 10-year treasuries is at 0.94%, while 30-year yields are at 1.58%.
An emergency rate cut from the Fed did little to boost confidence as the coronavirus continues to spread. For more, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. After a meeting of G7 finance ministers, the Fed was the only central bank to cut rates. They did so in dramatic fashion, and that carries several risks, according to former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers.
You're running a risk that you're going to scare people with the magnitude and gravity of your action. Second, you're running a risk that you've shot your ammunition and you won't have so much of it left. And you'll also demonstrate to people that it's really not that effective ammunition for the kind of war we're in. Once people figure all that out, they'll be less confident than when they thought you had a major tool in reserve.
There are expectations the Fed could act again as soon as this month. Traders currently price in over 40 basis points of easing at their March 18th meeting. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thank you, John. Now, Larry Summers isn't the only one questioning the effectiveness of rate cuts from the Fed. We spoke this morning with veteran investor Mark Mobius.
The problem is not so much interest rates. Interest rates are already very, very low. The problem is the supply chain coming out of China. This is the big, big difference between what we have now and what we had with SARS and these other problems we had in the past.
And we'll get more insight from the Federal Reserve later today when we speak exclusively with Jim Bullard. Tune in for an extended conversation with the St. Louis Fed president coming up at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio.
And U.S. futures are leading gains in equity markets this morning. In Asia, stocks rose for a third straight session. Here with the details is Bloomberg's Juliet Sally in Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. South Korea's Kospi Index led the gains in Asia, up 2.2% in Seoul to 2,059 points, while the won also rose as South Korea's government said it's seeking parliamentary approval for an extra $9.8 billion to help businesses hit by the coronavirus. Hong Kong banking stocks fell as the de facto central bank there followed the Fed with a half-point cut, and India's rupee was the only losing currency in Asia Wednesday on rising concerns about the spread of the virus in India. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Again, S&P futures are up 56 points. Dow futures up 529 and NASDAQ futures up 171. 10-year Treasury up 17/30 seconds. They yield 0.94%. They yield on the 2-year 0.66% and the 30-year yield at 1.57%. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's get more post-Super Tuesday and the rest of what's happening around the world. Here's Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Strong showings from Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders last night could leave Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg questioning their candidacies. Warren told supporters in Detroit that American democracy is hanging in the balance.
I'm in this because I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back.
Michael Bloomberg spoke in West Palm Beach, Florida.
All across America, I've been talking with voters, and my message is simple. I am running to beat Donald Trump.
We should know that Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio.
There are other interesting races from Super Tuesday. Jeff Sessions, President Donald Trump's first Attorney General, will face a Republican Party runoff in his bid to reclaim the Alabama Senate seat that the GOP had lost to Democrat Doug Jones in 2017. Sessions spoke to his supporters last night.
We have this opportunity to turn the Trump agenda into reality, and I'm the man for that job.
Sessions and Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn football coach, each racked up about a third of the votes in the primary. That is short of the majority needed to avoid a runoff scheduled for March 31st. Department of Homeland Security officials said technical glitches were at standard levels in Super Tuesday voting, and there was no spike in disinformation campaigns, even though foreign adversaries are still seeking to disrupt the 2020 presidential contest. Japan's Olympics minister says theoretically, it is possible to delay this summer's Tokyo Olympics to a later date in 2020. That's amid worries the coronavirus could cause the games to be canceled for the first time since World War II. Meantime, total infections worldwide top 93,000 with 9 deaths so far in the U.S. South Korea and Germany are reporting more infections, while cases in India and Malaysia surge. The global death toll now stands at 3,200. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, on a win for the Nets in Boston. Certainly looked like it'd be a fifth straight loss, down by 21 in the third quarter, by 17 going to the fourth. The Nets pulled it out in overtime, 129 to 120. They had Karis LeVert to thank. He scored 26 points in the fourth quarter. He scored all 11 of the Brooklyn points in OT. Celtics only scored 2. LeVert finished with a career high 51. Rangers had the hot streak, winning 9 of 10, but 2 losses to Philadelphia. Last night, red-hot St. Louis came into the Garden, took their 7th win in a row. 3-1, a bouncing puck broke a 1-all tie third period to do in Rangers coach David Quinn.
There wasn't a lot of room out there. There was a playoff feel to it. Unfortunate, a bounce. Ends up in the back of our net, which was the difference in the game. You know, a game of that magnitude where there was such little room and not many scoring chances, and the margin for error is so small. And unfortunately, we were on the wrong end of it.
Islanders slump continues. A 6-2 loss to Montreal. Thomas Greiss got benched. The Isles, who began the year 16-3, have lost 4 in a row. They're under 500 over the last 3 months. Devils shut out in Vegas 3-0. A win for Rutgers that will greatly help its NCAA chances. 78-67 over 9th-ranked Maryland. Scarlet Knights have 18 home wins, the most of any team in the nation. Yankees beat the Red Sox in Tampa 9-1. 3 hitless innings from Masahiro Tanaka. Noah Syndergaard gave up a couple of runs. The Mets lost to the Marlins 6-1. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. This red headline just crossed the Bloomberg terminal moments ago. Delegates to OPEC Plus say Saudi Arabia is pushing the cartel to agree to a cut of more than 1 million barrels of crude oil a day. West Texas Intermediate is rising on the news. Right now, WTI is higher by 1.7% or 82 cents, $48 even a barrel. Brent crude is up 1.7% or 87 cents at 52.71. U.S. futures moving higher, surging this morning after Super Tuesday. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now if you've ever...
As we move towards 1 trillion connected devices, compound semiconductors made in Wales are set to power the 4th industrial revolution. Wales also has one of the largest cybersecurity ecosystems in the UK and a thriving fintech industry. 8 universities are producing a talented tech workforce for the future, and our devolved government has a strong vision for growth. If you're looking to expand your business, go to tradeandinvest.wales. This is tech. This is Wales.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Here's Paul Allen.
Now, despite President Trump's claims that his administration is ready for the coronavirus in the US, there is mounting concern that the government is grossly underprepared. So let's take a look at the situation now with Dr. Caitlin Rivers. She's Professor of Epidemiology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. So, Dr. Rivers, thanks for joining us. What is your assessment of US preparedness for this?
I'm pleased that diagnostic capacity in the United States has expanded this week and will continue to expand in the coming days. I do think that will mean that we will identify more cases in the United States, which might feel alarming, but it's really us just catching up to the current situation and getting a better understanding of that epidemiological situation.
Are enough tests available?
Yes, they are coming online. About half of state and local public health testing laboratories now have capacity to test, and I understand the rest of them will be coming online this week. That will bring us to about 10,000 tests a day if things run smoothly.
What's your best guess? How many Americans do you think actually are infected by this virus that we don't know about?
It's impossible to say, and that's why it is so important that we have testing capacity. And that's why I think we will see more cases in the coming days and weeks because there has been transmission likely happening that we haven't observed.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise this morning. We check the markets markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 60 points. Dow futures up 559. NASDAQ futures up 182. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury up 16/30 seconds. Yields 0.94%. The yield on the 2-year 0.66%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.7% or 82 cents at $48 a barrel. And COMEX gold down 0.25% or $3.80 at $16.40.60 an ounce. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, a resurgent Joe Biden scored sweeping victories from Texas to Massachusetts on Super Tuesday, revitalizing a presidential bid that was in danger just days earlier. His rival Bernie Sanders seized the biggest prize with a win in California. Total coronavirus infections worldwide topped 93,000 with 9 deaths so far in the U.S. The global death toll now stands at 3,200. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Celtics in overtime. The Warriors won. The Wizards lost. In the NHL, the Islanders, Devils, and Rangers all lost. The Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's just before 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's get more now on those Super Tuesday results. Terry Haynes joins us this morning, founder of Pangea Policy Advisory. And I'm trying to remember, Terry, last time we spoke, I think you channeled the Princess Bride, calling the Joe Biden campaign mostly dead. Can't say that this morning.
Well, the Princess Bride reference is only mostly dead, implying that the character is about to get up and live again, and that's why I did it. And I expected Biden to do that in large part, and he did. I think he marginally overperformed. But bottom line for the markets is, and market keywords or algorithms apparently recognize Biden as good and Sanders as bad. But my view remains that the Super Tuesday result may be good for Biden, but it's market negative overall because it means continued uncertainty for months, probably all the way to July in the nomination, about who the Democratic nominee will be, and therefore how likely and whether Trump and Republican market positive policies on tax and deregulation, things like that, actually remain.
What underlines that ongoing uncertainty for you? I mean, Biden did show, I think it could be argued, a surprising victory in Texas, where Bernie Sanders had been polling high for the last several days, and even in Elizabeth Warren's home state of Massachusetts, which many would argue Sanders would have done well in as well.
Yeah, I will tell you, I called the Texas result for Biden. And it's fairly, not to pat myself on the back, but it's fairly easy to do when you don't have a lot of polls and you see somebody like Sanders coming up an average of 8 points ahead. I'd written about this the other day to say, look, there's always a great deal of hype about blue Texas and progressive Texas rising, and it never pans out, whether it's Beto O'Rourke or primary elections where the more conservative Democrat wins, that sort of thing. I just thought instinctively that Biden was going to do better there than the polls indicated. That turned out. Massachusetts, people may just be getting tired of Senator Warren as much as anything else, or they'd like her to stay home and actually perceive that she needs to stay home and actually be a senator more. But Biden's got a good roll going, absolutely, number one. Number two, he's going to keep that good roll going, most likely, in 10 primaries, 6 on March 10th, 4 on March 17th. The good news is they're mostly in Biden-friendly states. The bad news is they're mostly in states that Trump won in 2016. So a performance of Biden's strength in the Democratic primary does not necessarily mean that he'll do well in the general there.
So where do you see the race going from here? You mentioned some of those states coming up this month. Obviously, this month is going to be a huge portion of delegates being awarded here. How do you see the map shaking out here?
Well, the map shaking out is, the likeliest result, and I think the majority result, is that no candidate gets an outright majority at the end of this process. The reason for that is, similar to what happened on Super Tuesday, is that there's proportional, the delegates are rewarded proportionally. So, Biden's problem, good news for Biden last night is he won a lot of states. The bad news for Biden is the places where he won a lot of the states he won, he didn't win by that much, by and large. And places like Texas where he barely wins, what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot of delegates for Sanders. So Biden and Sanders are going to stay in this race, and they're going to stay in this race for quite a while. What you're going to end up with is what a lot of people call a contested convention or a brokered convention, where Biden or Sanders or whoever else are going to try to make their cases and try to come up with the maximum amount of delegates. And to do that, they're going to have to compromise with a lot of people and a lot of people in the party that don't want what they want. So you're going to end up with not a pure Biden government. You're going to end up with a lot of progressives in a Biden government, and that's probably market negative too.
Thanks for this, as always, Terry. Good talking to you. That's Terry Haynes. He is the founder of Pangea Policy Advisory. And as we continue to watch the results roll in from Super Tuesday, U.S. futures are rising, but this does come at a time of heightened volatility for markets. Right now, the VIX is at 3264. For more on that volatility, we bring in Bloomberg's John Tucker with our next guest. Good morning, John.
Thanks, Nathan. The Federal Reserve delivers an emergency rate cut. Stocks take a dive. Bonds rallied. Economist Dennis Gartman is here this morning to give us his perspective. Dennis, what happened?
Well, I think a lot of people took a look and said, what does the Fed know that we don't know? How much does the Fed believe that the economy is indeed slowing rather dramatically? Supply chains are being prohibited somewhat. Not somewhat, rather dramatically. And I think that the average investor yesterday said, the Fed knows something I don't know. I want to go to the sidelines. We're seeing a rebound this morning, probably on the news out of the elections, that Mr. Biden did a lot better than the arch socialist progressive Mr. Sanders. And I think you're getting a relief rally here. But I think that the trend is now down in share prices, and I think stock prices will head lower, not higher, over the course of the next several weeks.
Well, a rally in the futures, at least this morning. Also, bonds. A lot of momentous events have shaken the United States over its history. None was sufficient to drive long-term money down to these levels. That's a remarkable statement.
It is a remarkable statement, and we live in remarkable times. The fact that the 10-year is now under 1% yield and heading even lower is astonishing to me. Perhaps the stock market this morning is responding also not only to the victory by Mr. Biden and a less progressive Democratic presidential nominee likely coming out of the elections yesterday, but also that there is no alternative. Maybe that's what's happening here. Also, in the last 15 minutes, I don't know if you've watched, but suddenly something has happened in the crude oil market. It's rallied almost $1 in the last 10 minutes. Some news.
Yeah, there was OPEC saying it's urging intervention at this point.
Well, it's long overdue. They will need to see if the OPEC nations can actually stick together. The problem that OPEC has, or OPEC Plus more properly, is that Rosneft will probably the leading producer of crude oil in the former Soviet Union and now the modern day Russia. Rosneft has clearly been antagonistic towards any cut in production whatsoever. So we'll see what happens out of there.
A couple of the great calls over the past few years include Dr. Schilling's bet on lower rates and the call to buy gold in yen from one Dennis Gartman. Can you still be long bonds, and can you still be long gold?
I think you have to be long bonds, and I think you have to be long gold. The two tend to move in contravention, or we have been taught over the course of the past 40 years to believe that gold and bonds must move in contravention. The fact that they're moving in convention or in tandem with one another is interesting, unique, and likely to remain unique for a long period of time. I think, yes, you have to remain long of bonds and long of gold. I've been a proponent of owning gold in non-U.S. dollar terms. Now I'm going to tell you I think you need to own gold in dollar terms, euro terms, and yen terms. I think this is a global bull market in gold, predicated upon inflationary expectations. We'll see if the monetary authorities become continuously expansionary. If they are, I think you're going to continue to see bonds go higher, yields go lower, and gold prices go up.
What is a long-term investor to do if I have an 8 to 10 year hold?
If you have an 8 to 10 year hold, I think that you have to be reducing your position in the stock market. If you have a 20 year hold, I think you have to probably be holding your position in the stock market. If you have a 2 week hold perspective, I think you have to be very, very reticent about owning stocks. And I think if you have an 8 year perspective, I think you still want to be an owner of gold. I'm not a gold bug. I don't believe the world is coming to an end. I think we're going to be better off 10 years from now than we are now. We'll be better off 5 years from now than we are now. But I think if you have a short-term perspective, if you're heading towards retirement, if you're my age, 69, heading towards 70, you probably want to be very, very suspicious of being aggressively long in the stock market. I think you want to make sure that you are reducing your exposure. Depending on how long, if your exposure is for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, you want to be careful, very so.
When traders here in New York hear of a guy who worked in Midtown with coronavirus, and they start worrying, does that, when it hits closer to home here in New York, does that have an outsized impact on the overall market?
Well, for example, I have to drive to Raleigh this morning. I'm on the board of directors of NC State's Endowment Committee, and we have our quarterly meeting today. And they had an exposure. Somebody came down with the coronavirus, or at least that's what the rumor was. And my propensity to get in the car and be, happy about driving to Raleigh is somewhat reduced. I'm going, but so nonetheless, I think if I'm somewhat suspicious, I think that the average American is probably more so. I think everybody is reducing the amount of time they go to restaurants, reducing the amount of time they're in airplanes, reducing the amount of time they're in shopping centers, reducing the amount of time they're going to basketball games. I think everybody is a little bit suspicious. I think everybody's propensity to be much more careful has been greatly enhanced.
Dennis, as always, thanks a lot to economist Dennis Gartman. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Karen.
I'll take it from here, John. Thanks. It's coming up to 5:29 on Wall Street now, and Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. And we are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are rebounding. After yesterday's 780-point plunge for the Dow, the gains came overnight as Super Tuesday results rolled in and showing a remarkable comeback for Joe Biden.
Those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
Biden won 9 states, including big upsets in Texas and Massachusetts, while Bernie Sanders took California, Colorado, Utah, and Vermont. Jeannie Zaino is a political science professor at Iona College.
This is a fight over delegates. We don't know where that ends up, but I think it's almost like whiplash how fast this thing has changed. Donald Trump has a lot to do with this. Democrats do not want to lose, and they are very fearful Bernie Sanders will cost them this election.
The latest results show Biden with 453 delegates, while Sanders has 382. Elizabeth Warren came away from the night with 50, and Michael Bloomberg claimed 44. And we should mention Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio.
The U.S. futures got a boost from those Super Tuesday results, but volatility remains high. Scott Minard sees stocks sliding another 15% from here. He is Chief Investment Officer at Guggenheim.
Until we find some clear visibility on earnings and how this virus is evolving, I think it would be premature to be stepping in now, other than maybe to buy U.S. Treasuries.
Treasury yields continue to trade near record lows, with a 10-year yield currently at 0.93%. Minard predicts that could eventually head as low as just 0.25%.
An emergency rate cut from the Fed did little to instill confidence in investors and carries major risks for the central bank. That's according to former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers.
You're running a risk that you're going to scare people with the magnitude and gravity of your action. Second, you're running a risk that you've shot your ammunition and you won't have so much of it left. And you'll also demonstrate to people that it's really not that effective.
Now, we will get more insight from the Fed later this morning when we speak exclusively with James Bullard. You can catch that extended conversation with the St. Louis Fed president. It's coming up at 11 a.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thanks, Nathan. And we are watching NYMEX crude oil this morning up 1.25%. Saudi Arabia is pushing OPEC Plus to agree on an oil output cut of more than 1 million barrels a day to compensate for the demand hit from the global spread of the coronavirus. That's according to delegates. Again, NYMEX crude oil up 1.3% of 61 cents. It's at $47.80 a barrel right now. Brent is up 1.2% or 60 cents at $52.44. Meanwhile, futures are also higher. S&P futures up 62 points. Dow futures up 575. And NASDAQ futures up 189. The DAX in Germany is up 1.2%. CAC in Paris up 1.4%. And the FTSE 100 up 1.5%. 10-year Treasury up 19/30 seconds. Again, the yield 0.93%. And the yield on the 2-year at 0.65%. COMEX gold is little change this morning, up 40 cents at $1,644.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1153 against the dollar, the yen 107.49. And straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thanks a lot. It's 5:33 on Wall Street. This news update is brought to you by Land Rover. The Own the Adventure sales event is happening now until March 31st. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport. Land Rover, above and beyond. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Joe Biden ended a triumphant Super Tuesday, winning at least 9 states, including Texas. Bernie Sanders snatched the delegate-rich state of California. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports both candidates enthusiastically addressed their faithful.
Both sides can and will claim victories. For Joe Biden, winning Texas was a major deal. His message, unity.
We need to bring everybody along. Everybody. We want a nominee who will beat Donald Trump.
For Sanders, taking the big fish, California, is good for bragging, and he says a groundswell.
What makes this movement unique is we are taking on the corporate establishment.
Progressive and moderate forms coming to shape. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Senator Elizabeth Warren finished a disappointing third in her home state of Massachusetts. Warren spoke to supporters in Detroit.
Fighting back is an act of patriotism.
Michael Bloomberg spoke to supporters last night in West Palm Beach, Florida.
No matter how many delegates we win tonight, we have done something no one else thought was possible. In just 3 months, we've gone from 1% of the polls to being a contender for the Democratic nomination for president.
We should mention that Michael Bloomberg is the majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Jeff Sessions, President Trump's first attorney general, will face a Republican Party runoff in his bid to reclaim the Alabama Senate seat. The GOP lost Democrat Doug Jones in 2017. Sessions told his supporters last night that he is the best person to promote the Trump agenda in Washington.
When no one else dared to do it, I endorsed Donald Trump. People thought I was nuts.
Sessions and former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville each racked up about a third of the votes in the primary. At least 25 people are dead and dozens injured after powerful tornadoes tore through central Tennessee early yesterday. Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.
Massive damage was done to numerous homes, some of them totally destroyed as if they never existed.
Another twister tore through central Nashville. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Let's bring in John Stashar.
Nathan, the theory goes one guy can't win a basketball game by himself. Last night in Boston, the Nets' Karis LeVert won the game pretty much by himself.
LeVert, he's feeling it. Left of the lane. 2 feet in the paint. Turnaround fadeaway. It's scored! Oh, what a night for Karis LeVert. The Nets have scored the first 8 here in overtime. LeVert's got 48.
That's radio. He finished with a career-high 51 points. LeVert scored 26 in the fourth quarter, 26 of the 51 that the Nets put on the board in the fourth. He then scored all 11 of the Brooklyn points in OT, outscoring the Celtics by himself 11-2. The Nets come from 21 down and their 4-game losing streak, 129-120. Local hockey, not a good night. St. Louis beat the Rangers 3-1 at the Garden. The Blues, 7th straight win. The Rangers, 3rd loss in a row. Islander losing streak reached 4. A 6-2 home loss to Montreal. The Devils were shut out in Vegas 3-0. More home cooking for Rutgers. They stormed the court after a 78-67 upset of 9th-ranked Maryland, improving the Scarlet Knights' home record to 18-1, most home wins in school history. It's a win that'll go a long way towards getting Rutgers into the NCAA tournament. Nationally, Tennessee with an upset win at Kentucky. Spike Lee, Knicks season ticket holder for 30 years, says he won't attend any more games this season. He got into it the other night with Garden Security for entering through the wrong gate. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
Thanks, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now, with the cover on how Reddit users are shaking up the stock market. Also in this week's issue, why Walmart is looking to move deeper into healthcare. Matthew Boyle wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
Nobody likes, paying for healthcare. They don't know what they're going to pay. Walmart's like, we can bring, some clarity to this. We're Walmart. So let's go ahead and do it.
I'll read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio. Watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report. For that, we turn to Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Hi, Nathan. Connecticut lawmakers are revisiting a plan to expand the gambling reach of 2 federally recognized tribes. But the governor says lawmakers should instead support a simpler competing bill that would authorize the tribes, the state's lottery, and existing off-track betting operators in Connecticut to conduct sports wagering. Well, life insurance companies are pursuing wealthy private colleges as a lucrative growing market to lend money. Princeton is among schools in the U.S. which have borrowed from insurance companies, according to public records and regulatory filings. Nestle Waters plans to cut 105 jobs in New York State. Layoffs in Westchester County will take place starting June 1st, according to a New York State WARN notice. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thank you. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KTRH in Houston. Experts from OPEC are urging oil ministers to consider a larger production cut.
I'm Steve Podeskin on 1010 Winds in New York. We're reporting on J.P. Morgan Chase testing a work-from-home contingency plan as coronavirus spreads.
I'm Caroline Hepgill, Bloomberg DAB, Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on warnings about the economic impact of coronavirus from the outgoing Bank of England chief.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that Boeing is postponing a supplier summit in Washington, D.C. amid escalating worries about the coronavirus.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting despite coronavirus fears, organizers of the New York Auto Show are pressing on.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. But there are more headlines involving the impact of the coronavirus on the business world. Google has scrapped its flagship TO conference that was supposed to happen this May. That gathering usually brings together thousands who partner with Google or build apps and websites for the company. Google is going to try to hold those sessions digitally. And the European Central Bank says it will restrict all non-essential travel through April 30th while it reassesses the situation. S&P futures are higher by 60 points. That's a 2% gain. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race, or because you have children or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
A half-price dream holiday. Wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free. Wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres. Ends 18th of March.
And at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update. Special report, Super Tuesday. A resurgent Joe Biden has scored wins across the country, including Texas, Arkansas, Alabama, Minnesota, North Carolina, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Virginia. Correspondent Jim Roop has more.
So I'm here to report we are very much alive.
Biden speaking to a Super Tuesday night crowd of supporters after winning a bulk of the states on the biggest primary day of this election cycle.
People are talking about a revolution. We started a movement. We've increased turnout.
Next stop, a debate in Phoenix next week, along with the Arizona primary. So the question is, can this Joe Biden resurgence continue?
Bernie Sanders sees the primary's biggest prize, a win in California.
We are taking on the corporate establishment.
Sanders also won Colorado, Utah, and Vermont. Mike Bloomberg plans to reassess whether he should stay in the race after disappointing results in the primaries. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are on the rise, with S&P futures up 60 points, Dow futures up 561, and NASDAQ futures up 181. The DAX in Germany's up 1.25%. 10-year Treasury up 16/30 seconds, yield 0.94%. The yield on the 2-year 0.66%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.1% or 55 cents at $47.73 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.1% on $1.70 to $16.42.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1147 against the dollar. The yen 107.51. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, former Vice President Joe Biden dominated Super Tuesday, winning 9 states, including Texas. However, Senator Bernie Sanders won delegate-rich California. Senator Elizabeth Warren did not win any states and finished a disappointing third in her home state of Massachusetts. Congress begins discussions on legislation that would provide funds to help fight the coronavirus. There have been at least 9 deaths in the U.S. because of the virus. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Celtics in overtime. The Warriors won. The Wizards lost. In the NHL, the Islanders, Devils, and Rangers all lost. The Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, where it's 5:48 on Wall Street this morning after Super Tuesday. Kevin Cirilli joins us, Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg Radio and Television. What a roller coaster ride this campaign has been, Kevin, for Joe Biden, coming in as the front runner, all but written off just a week or so ago, and now literally a Super Tuesday for him.
Well, the roller coaster didn't come off the tracks last night.
Yeah.
He beat expectations. I mean, he needed to win big, and he did, and he picked up Texas. I mean, if you're former Vice President Joe Biden, you're waking up to front-runner status. And I think now this really does become a two-person race between Senator Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Now, the next round of contests in just over a week and a half, it will likely be a two-person debate before that. But I think the bottom line is it's Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders.
Right. You can't really understate the fact that Bernie Sanders picking up California, I mean, that certainly keeps him in this. And I guess the question now going forward is, how long does this go on to the convention?
Well, Biden World is putting out they want to wrap this up relatively quickly. Senator Bernie Sanders saying, hey, not so fast. And based upon my reporting, Nathan, I can tell you that the Sanders campaign has really remodeled their convention efforts, the contested convention efforts, compared with last year. You know, Craig Gordon, our Washington bureau chief, said to me last night, and he made this important point, which was that Sanders actually waited a couple of months before he eventually backed Hillary Clinton for the nomination in the 2016 cycle, and the Clinton campaign really pushed back against that because they thought that significantly hurt her in the general election. However, Bernie Sanders winning California and really winning other states last night, as he was anticipated to do, he has a movement behind him. So, you know, it looks like neither candidate is going to get to the 1,991 delegates before the contested convention. But Bernie Sanders has leverage. Joe Biden has leverage. And, you know, this process is playing out. I think that the surprise in this is, number one, the size of Biden's victories on Super Tuesday. Again, he beat expectations. And number two, just how quickly the field has narrowed. We thought this would happen in the second half of this week. Right. But it actually happened in the first half of this week.
And I guess the basic question that remains now is what happens next for Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg after their disappointing nights? Does this become officially a two-person race? I mean, what are their campaigns saying now?
Well, it's been widely reported that former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg has said that he's going to have a meeting today to reassess his campaign and where it goes moving forward. The Bloomberg campaign had said that they were going to have a strong Super Tuesday showing. The crux of their campaign was going to be a bevy of an ad blitz, unprecedented ad buys that would lead to momentum coming out of Super Tuesday. It didn't happen. As far as Senator Elizabeth Warren, she suffered a bruising defeat in her home state of Massachusetts. She finished third in her home state. Joe Biden pulling off really one of the big upsets of the night by winning in Massachusetts. So, you know, she as well had hoped to have a strong showing in California. It didn't pan out. But we don't know. I mean, with Elizabeth Warren, what's interesting is most people would suggest that she's more ideologically aligned with Bernie Sanders. However, polls would suggest that her supporters are actually a bit more mixed. And so it would be incorrect to presume that all of her supporters would go to Bernie Sanders, and that because the polls suggest that a portion of them would go to Biden.
Bloomberg radio and television chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli. Long night for you, an exciting night. Thanks so much for being with us this morning after. And we should mention that Michael Bloomberg, candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP. That is the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. John.
All right, Nathan, John Tucker here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. Well, a more moderate tilt by Democrats giving a lift to futures this morning. Yesterday, the Federal Reserve delivered an emergency rate cut. Stocks plunged. Well, Michael Houston is CMC Markets chief market analyst. He's joining us this morning from London for his perspective. Not the reaction yesterday that Chairman Powell was looking for, Michael.
No, indeed, but we're sort of getting a delayed rally now, and I think at the moment investors are sort of trying to weigh up whether what the Fed has done is a good thing or a bad thing. At the moment, you know, when I look at the price action this week, the Dow was down 1,000 on Monday. It was up 1,000 on Monday, down 700 yesterday, and now it looks as if it's going to open up 600 today. But it's within the confines of the ranges that we've seen over the course of the past few days. The reaction of the bond market's a completely different story, though. I think the bond market's really getting ahead of the game here, John. If you look at the US 10-year yield, it's down 20 basis points this week alone.
Is this a top? Well, let me rephrase the question. Is it a bottom for stocks, and is it a top for bonds?
You know what, John? At this point in time, I really don't know. But the stock market rally does feel a little bit tenuous at the moment, given what's happening in bond markets. Generally, I would lean in the direction of bond markets simply because they tend to be most reliable. And certainly look at the US 10-year. The UK gilt yield here in London has hit an all-time low. And certainly bond markets are starting to price in much more easing. Now, the big question is whether that is the right response in terms of central bank action. I'm not sure it is. When you've got interest rates at record lows, you've got a G7 calling for coordinated action on the part of governments and central banks. It beggars belief that the Trump administration is not suspending tariffs on Chinese goods and services. That, for me, would send a much bigger message to markets than central bank cuts when you've already got rates at record lows. The level of rates is not the problem here. The problem here is that governments need to do more. And it needs to start with the Trump administration getting off this ideological hobby horse of tariffs on China.
All right. Well, there's the argument for fiscal side. Are you saying that the Fed's pushing on a string?
I believe it is, yes. I think, there's very little the Fed can do. I think the Fed made a mistake yesterday. I think really they could have afforded to wait. Now, Loretta Mester was on TV this morning saying that they had seen some evidence of economic weakness as a result of the uncertainty over coronavirus. I think it'll be interesting to see what the beige book tells us later today. Certainly the hard data at the moment doesn't show really any significant signs of weakness, which leads me to believe that maybe the Fed is seeing something that we're not.
And on the corporate side, you've seen suspension of any number of forecasts. When does that start to show up, and what's that impact going to be?
Well, that's going to take a while to play out, John. Certainly, I think over the course of the next 5 to 6 weeks. You're looking at the data out of China. The data out of China is horrible. Services PMI this morning, 26.5, down from 51.8 in January. Car sales down 80% in February. So certainly I think in terms of the Chinese data, that's likely to ripple out into Europe. At the moment, the PMIs out of Europe are still well above 50 in terms of the services sector. Italy, particularly on the front line here in Europe, isn't showing any signs of weakness yet. That is likely to change over the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Are there, real quick, are we seeing any liquidity problems out there?
Not really, no. I mean, markets are moving. We're not seeing much in the way of share suspensions or trading suspensions. Markets are moving. It's just very, very volatile, simply because we don't really know how the next 4 or 5 weeks is going to play out in terms of hits to revenues, hits to profit forecasts, and what have you. Central banks can smooth the way, if you like, in terms of providing liquidity. But what I think we're really looking for is for banks to help out companies with cash flow problems to get them over the hump of this disruption. It's
with rates
like that.
Rates where they are, banks, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Absolutely, it is. You know, and that's why the ECB is very, very limited in what it can do with respect to rates, because they're already deeply negative.
Michael, as always, a pleasure. Michael Hewson joining us this morning from London, the chief market analyst at CMC Markets. And as we look at futures, again, you could argue that more moderate tilt from the Democratic Party giving a lift to futures today. Dow futures up 540, S&P futures up 57, NASDAQ E-mini futures up 173 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Influential.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, the Met Police.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Do you do the same thing every weekend? You know, meet up with the same friends for brunch, browse around the same shops, eat the same Saturday night takeaway. Mine's a lamb balti with mushroom pilau rice. Snuggle up next to the same person and watch the same brain-numbing reality TV. Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Joe Biden stages a comeback on Super Tuesday.
Those have been knocked down, counted out, left behind. This is your campaign.
U.S. futures climb after Biden's surprise win, though volatility remains high.
And the Fed's emergency rate cut fails to ease concerns about a global downturn.
Candidates are reassessing their presidential bids after Super Tuesday. Plus, could the coronavirus delay the Tokyo Summer Olympics? I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower on sports. Huge comeback by the Nets. They won in overtime in Boston. Rangers, Islanders, and Devils all lost. Rutgers upset Maryland.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory and accounting firm helping clients be in a position of strength in today's modern business landscape. Visit Witham.com to learn more.
U.S. futures are rebounding from yesterday's sharp declines as bond yields around the world continue to fall. 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are up 58 points. Dow futures up 553. NASDAQ futures up 177. The DAX in Germany's up 1.2%. CAC in Paris up 1.3%. And the FTSE 100 up 1.4%. 10-year Treasury up 16/30 seconds. Yield 0.94%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.66%. And NYMEX crude oil up 1.1%. And this data check brought to you by IBKR, the professionals' gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy low-cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com. Nathan.
Karen, thanks. We begin with results from Super Tuesday, where Joe Biden made a comeback on the biggest primary night of the campaign. He won 9 states, including upsets in Texas and Massachusetts.
For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
Biden also won Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama, and Minnesota. Bernie Sanders claimed victory in California.
We're going to win because the people understand it is our campaign, our movement, which is best positioned to defeat Trump.
Sanders also picked up wins in Colorado, Utah, and his home state of Vermont, though the race has yet to be called in Maine. The results all but narrow the race to 2 candidates after disappointing showings for Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg.
The latest poll shows Biden with 453 delegates, while Sanders has 382, though it could take days to count all the votes in California. We get more from Bloomberg Washington Bureau Chief Craig Gordon.
Joe Biden had a really good night, but California, 415 delegates, by far the biggest prize of the night. And if Bernie Sanders does as well there as the poll suggests, he could come away with a lion's share of those delegates.
Still, the night belonged to Joe Biden after starting his campaign with disappointing showings in Iowa and New Hampshire. Bloomberg contributor Rick Davis puts the night in perspective.
South Carolina, the big win that gave him this opportunity was a record turnout, surpassing 2008, which was the high water mark at that point in time. And now we're seeing states like Virginia hitting also high water marks in turnout. It's not just an accident. It is a phenomenon.
And when it comes to other candidates, Elizabeth Warren came away from the night with 50 delegates, and Michael Bloomberg claimed 44 after a win in American Samoa. So far, neither candidate is conceding, and we should note that Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio.
Well, U.S. futures rose overnight as Super Tuesday results rolled in, but volatility remains high after yesterday's 780-point plunge for the Dow. So where do we go from here? We asked Guggenheim Chief Investment Officer Scott Meinert.
I see another 15% decline, maybe even more from where we are right now in stocks. And when I turn to the bond market, I think that we're going to continue to see the Fed have to ease. And I believe that our target of 25 basis points on the 10-year note and 1% on the long bond are almost inevitable at this point.
Well, right now the yield on 10-year treasuries is at 0.94%, while 30-year yields are at 1.57%.
An emergency rate cut from the Fed did little to boost confidence as the coronavirus continues to spread. And for more, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. After a meeting of G7 finance ministers, the Federal Reserve is the only central bank to cut rates. They did so in dramatic fashion, and that carries several risks, according to former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers.
You're running a risk that you're going to scare people with the magnitude and gravity of your action. Second, you're running a risk that you've shot your ammunition and you won't have so much of it left. And you'll also demonstrate to people that it's really not that effective ammunition for the kind of war we're in. Once people figure all that out, they'll be less confident than when they thought you had a major tool in reserve.
There are expectations the Fed could act again as soon as this month. A trader's currently pricing in over 40 basis points of easing at their March 18th meeting. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. Now, Larry Summers isn't the only one questioning the Fed's effectiveness. We spoke this morning with veteran investor Mark Mobius.
The problem is not so much interest rates. Interest rates are already very, very low. The problem is the supply chain coming out of China. This is the big difference between what we have now and what we had with SARS and these other problems we had in the past.
We'll get more insight from the Fed later today when we speak exclusively with Jim Bullard. Tune in for that extended conversation with the St. Louis Fed president. It's coming up at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio.
And U.S. futures are leading gains in equity markets this morning. In Asia, stocks rose for a third straight session. And here are the details as Bloomberg's Juliet Sally in Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. South Korea's Kospi Index led the gains in Asia, up 2.2% in Seoul to 2,059 points, while the won also rose as South Korea's government said it's seeking parliamentary approval for an extra $9.8 billion to help businesses hit by the coronavirus. Hong Kong banking stocks fell as the de facto central bank there followed the Fed with a half-point cut, and India's rupee was the only losing currency in Asia Wednesday on rising concerns about the spread of the virus in India. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. S&P futures up 56 points. Dow futures up 538. And NASDAQ futures up 172. The euro at 1.1140 against the dollar. British pound 1.2778 and the yen 107.52. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thank you. It's 6:07 on Wall Street. And for more on Super Tuesday and more news from around the world, here's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Strong showings from Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders last night could leave Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg questioning their candidacies. Warren told supporters in Detroit that American democracy is hanging in the balance.
Me, I'm in this because I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back.
Michael Bloomberg spoke in West Palm Beach, Florida.
All across America, I've been talking with voters, and my message is simple. I am running to beat Donald Trump.
We should know that Michael Bloomberg is the founder and a majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. There are other interesting races from Super Tuesday. Jeff Sessions, President Donald Trump's first attorney general, will face a Republican Party runoff in his bid to reclaim the Alabama Senate seat that the GOP lost to Democrat Doug Jones in 2017. Sessions spoke to his supporters last night.
We have this opportunity to turn the Trump agenda into reality, and I'm the man for that job.
Sessions and Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn football coach, each racked up about a third of the votes in the primary. That is short of the majority needed to avoid a runoff scheduled for March 31st. Department of Homeland Security officials said technical glitches were at standard levels in Super Tuesday voting, and there was no spike in disinformation campaigns. Japan's Olympics minister says it's theoretically possible to delay this summer's Tokyo Olympics to a later date in 2020. That's amid worries the coronavirus could cause the games to be canceled for the first time since World War II. Meantime, total infections worldwide topped 93,000 with 9 deaths so far in the U.S. South Korea and Germany are reporting more infections, while cases in India and Malaysia surge. The global death toll now stands at 3,200. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 6:09 on Wall. It's time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, what a win for the Nets in Boston. Certainly looked like it'd be a fifth straight loss, down by 21 in the third quarter, by 17 going to the fourth. The Nets pulled it out in overtime, 129-120. They have Karis LeVert to thank. He scored 26 points in the fourth quarter. He scored all 11 of the Brooklyn points in OT. Celtics only scored 2 in OT. LeVert finished with a career-high 51. Rangers had the hot streak, winning 9 of 10, but 2 losses to Philadelphia. And then last night, red-hot St. Louis came into the Garden and won their 8th in a row, 3-1. A wraparound goal broke a 1-all tie in the third period. Did in Rangers coach David Quinn.
There wasn't a lot of room out there. There was a playoff feel to it. Unfortunate a bounce. Ends up in the back of our net, which was the difference in the game. You know, a game of that magnitude where there was such little room and not many scoring chances, and the margin for error is so small. And unfortunately, we were on the wrong end of it.
Islanders slump continues. 6-2 home loss to Montreal. Thomas Greiss got benched. The Isles began the season 16-3. They've lost 4 in a row. They're under 500 over the last 3 months. Devils were shut out in Vegas 3-0. A win for Rutgers that will greatly help its NCAA chances. 78-67 over 9th-ranked Maryland. The Scarlet Knights have 18 home wins. That's a school record. It's the most home wins for any team in the nation. Yankees beat the Red Sox in Tampa 9-1. 3 hitless innings from Masahiro Tanaka, who had struggled against the Sox last season. Noah Syndergaard gave up a couple runs. The Mets lost to the Marlins 6-1. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
And John, in other sports news, Amazon will stream 21 Yankees games this year to Prime members. They'll only be available to subscribers in the area where many Yankees fans live. That'd be New York, Connecticut, northeastern Pennsylvania, and parts of New Jersey. They will also be simulcast on local TV broadcasters. Back in August, the Yanks joined forces with Sinclair Broadcast Group and Amazon to buy the team's cable network in a deal valued at almost $3.5 billion. Futures moving higher this morning after Super Tuesday. S&P futures with a gain of almost 56 points right now. Dow futures ahead by 530 points. NASDAQ futures higher by 168 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
A change is coming. Millions of people across the UK are realising that if their broadband's out of contract, they could be out of pocket. So it's time to switch and save with Vodafone Superfast Broadband for £21.95 a month. Join the Great British Broadband switch today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
18-month contract subject to credit check. Publicly available out of contract, non-promotional pricing. Superfast 1, 73% of customers receive sync speeds above 35 megabits per second. See vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs. or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Yvonne Mann.
Singapore is implementing more measures to counter the impact of the coronavirus outbreak. It says its immediate task right now is to boost tourism in the country with plans to upgrade hotels and attractions. Of course, the move comes on the back of a budget that aims to provide $5.6 billion of economic stimulus. Let's get more with Singapore's Trade and Industry Minister, Chan Chun Sing. Minister, good to have you with us. First off, though, I want to talk about the coronavirus outbreak and how the Fed has moved on the back of that. How did we go from a virus that's common just like the flu to a 50 basis point cut by the Fed?
Well, I think it's not exactly like the flu, and I think that's what people are worried about. So if you talk to most of the medical professionals, I think they are working on a couple of scenarios. One is that this is what we call a V-shaped situation where people might recover, the economy might recover quickly, but there is a growing concern that this might take a while in a U-shape or even an L-shape situation. So I think what you have seen the Fed done yesterday is to make sure that they show up the confidence. But I must say that it takes more than just a Fed cut to restore the confidence, because people must see and feel for themselves the confidence in how governments are handling this in a coherent way.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and futures this morning on the rise with S&P futures up 54 points, Dow futures up 523, and NASDAQ futures up 164. The DAX in Germany's up 1%, 10-year Treasury up 13.30 seconds, yield 0.95%. The yield on the 2-year 0.66%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.5% or 25 cents at $47.44 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.1% on $1.70 at $16.42.80 an ounce, and the euro 1.1148 against the dollar, yen 107.50. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, a resurgent Joe Biden scored sweeping victories from Texas to Massachusetts on Super Tuesday, revitalizing a presidential bid that was endangered just days earlier. His rival Bernie Sanders seized the biggest prize with a win in California. Total coronavirus infections worldwide topped 93,000, with 9 deaths so far in the U.S. The global death toll now stands at 3,200. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Celtics in overtime. The Warriors won. The Wizards lost. In the NHL, the Islanders, Devils, and Rangers all lost. The Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's coming up to 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. And for more on the results from Super Tuesday, we welcome back Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. What a night for Joe Biden. What a morning for his campaign. What do you make of his comeback, Greg?
Really astonishing. I mean, it started, obviously, Nathan, in South Carolina with the endorsement of a very powerful member of Congress, and it continued. I think as the post-mortem is written, African-American voters are going to be a big part of the story.
What other parts of the story are you looking at? I mean, he has shown evidence of being able to build a pretty broad coalition that up until just about a week ago, Bernie Sanders was arguing that he was able to build in Nevada.
I think a lot of Democrats said in the last few days, look, Biden's not perfect, he has flaws, but he could win. And I think you couldn't say that as convincingly for Bernie Sanders. And I think the desire to get anybody who could beat Trump was a dominant factor.
Do you see Bernie Sanders continuing to go on, particularly given his victory in California, the biggest prize of the night?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got more primaries next week, Missouri and Michigan, Mississippi, Washington. I think that he'll stay in for quite a while. The delegate total is still fairly close. We'll see after a few days what the final numbers are in California. They'll have to allocate delegates. But no, I think Bernie will stay in. I'm not so sure about Bloomberg or Elizabeth Warren, however.
Right. Where do you see their campaigns going from here? Elizabeth Warren, obviously, with a pretty disappointing third place finish in her home state of Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was really an embarrassment for her. I have to think she's, got to be thinking about getting out. She doesn't have a lot of money. And as far as Mike Bloomberg goes, I still think he's quite good on issues, but he just hasn't gotten any traction. And, he spent about $500 million. He may decide that the risk-reward ratio is not in his favor.
And we should note, of course, that Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP. That is the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. As this race goes forward, Greg, how difficult is it to game out how a potential two-person race could play out here, given that the delegates aren't awarded in a winner-take-all fashion, that we could see a number of states awarding delegates, perhaps splitting the vote?
You could see a lot of talk ahead of Milwaukee about whether you need a plurality or a majority of delegates. So this is not over yet, but you have to say last night was just a remarkable night for Joe Biden, and he's on a roll. Momentum is really crucial in politics.
All right, Greg Valliere, always good talking with you. Thanks so much for being with us this morning after Super Tuesday. Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. U.S. futures did rise as those results rolled in last night, but volatility remains high in this market. And for more, we're joined by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
All right, thanks, Nathan. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. Well, it wasn't the response Jay Powell was looking for. The Federal Reserve delivered an emergency rate cut of 0.5%. Stocks took a dive on Tuesday. Daniel Morris, Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management, is our next guest. Thanks for being with us. Why wasn't that effective?
Well, I think there were two reactions from the market. One, it was a surprise that they moved so quickly and by so much, but then that immediately leads to the questions, well, what do they know that we don't know? And it's not clear that they do know anything more, but that type of response, emergency cut like this between the meetings would suggest they're quite worried, and then that makes other people feel more worried as well. I think the other concern is that even though you've had now this 50 basis point cut, the next question is, well, what good is it going to do? And the challenge with what we're dealing with now with the coronavirus epidemic is that monetary policy is even less effective than it's already been over the last decade or so in terms of stimulating economic growth. I mean, this is both a supply side shock and a demand side shock, and we're getting close to zero interest rates, so there's less scope anyway. And if your factory is shut down because you're not getting parts from China, lower interest rates don't help you.
If it is less effective, do we get more?
Well, yeah, you could do if we get another 25 basis point cut. Wouldn't be surprised, but again, I think it's going to be, as we say here in London, a damp squib that the markets aren't going to be particularly impressed by it. I think what markets are going to perhaps be happier with, and this is why I think you see more resilience in China, is some type of fiscal stimulus, give people some money to spend, and or if you think about corporations that are at risk because of higher bond spreads, providing kind of stopgap financing to them so it doesn't create a credit crunch down the road. So China's able to do that because it's much more of a controlled economy, but clearly much more challenging in the U.S. and in Western Europe.
Well, we've hoped for fiscal stimulus before, and it seems every time we're disappointed by that.
Yes, it is that perpetual gift that never quite shows up. The other concern, other than, can you get the political agreement to do it, which one would hope that we could if it's a crisis that the entire country is facing. But you've got to discuss it, and then you've got to find the projects, and we all remember shovel-ready plans that were there after 2008, and it was hard to see really what kind of help that did by the time it actually showed up. So it might be most important for sentiment, but the impact on the economy by the time it hits really spending and corporate profits, the crisis, frankly, will probably be past.
All right, well, here's a headline for you. AFP news agency breaking first coronavirus case in EU offices in Brussels. This is spreading.
Absolutely. If you look at the trajectory of new cases, now in China, of course, it's plateaued, but it's still continuing outside of China at a pretty rapid clip. And, certainly at this point, no one's going to project when that's going to plateau as well. So we're definitely in the ramping up phase. I think the market is going to need to see that trajectory start to plateau, though, before you really feel like you're past the worst, and the market has a sense of the outlook and then can hopefully recover from there. But that date, we think, is still a bit off in the future.
All right, can you be risk on?
We're not quite yet. We do look forward to buying the dip, but we don't know that we have actually reached the bottom of the dip quite yet. I mean, we still think the fundamental outlook is constructive, certainly not as constructive and positive as we would have said a month ago, but we're not forecasting a recession in America, so you still should have good growth. You now have got the extra benefit of the interest rate cuts, which eventually will stimulate growth later on once we get past the outbreak. So risk assets should recover, but like we said, we think it's probably going to be more risk off for the time being.
Okay, what do you look for a capitulation? I mean, one of the things on the screen this morning, VIX, it's down 10%, this measure of volatility, but still, I would say at elevated levels, above 30 at this point.
Absolutely, and I think the other reason to be a bit cautious at this point is even with the sell-off that you've had in the markets, or at the low point a couple days ago, valuations for the market as a whole were still on the high side. Now, a big part of that was actually concentrated in the technology sector, which is certainly well above average, whereas the other sectors of the economy are probably at average. But there's really no sectors that you would honestly call cheap. And if you want kind of a quintessential, correction and then capitulation and then recovery, it helps to get to absolutely cheap levels for equities, and we're certainly not there yet. So I think we're not necessarily expecting for markets to go quite that far. I don't know if we need to get to levels of March 2009, but it would suggest that we need to make markets a little more attractive before we're able to tempt investors back into it.
Well, here's another thing on my screen that pops up. 12-year dividend yield, S&P 500, 2.01%. Compare that right now with the long bond. The 10-year, let's go to the benchmark right now, 0.95, under 1% for the first time. What does that comparison tell you?
Well, it does tell you that over the medium term, if you're really just looking for income, equities, are going to become that fixed income investment that you used to think government bonds were. But at the same time, if you believe that 0.9 interest rate is forecasting a recession in the U.S., it's not going to matter what the dividend yield is on equities. You're going to have price declines that are going to swamp that. So that's really the debate that any investor needs to be having at this point. Do we think it's what you see in terms of bond yields is just a short-term reaction to the uncertainty and certainly to the cuts from the Fed, or is it a recessionary signal? So again, we're in the first camp. So we do think over the medium term equities